The woman stabbed her twin sister to death at Kgamogotlane village in January. Police say the murderer used a knife and an axe. Police spokesperson Hlulani Mashaba says the incident happened during a domestic dispute.
During the trial, the court heard how the accused attacked a twin sister after they got into a heated argument and stabbed her with a knife several times until she died at their residence. And she further chopped her twin sister with an axe before fleeing the scene. The Provincial Commissioner of the South African Police Service in Limpopo, Lieutenant General Thembi Hadebe, has welcomed the sentence and said no one has to take away somebody's life, even with the slightest provocation.
The KwaZulu-Natal Department of Health has halted all outreach programs at Ndwedwe in the north of Durban for the month. This follows a hijacking incident last week that left a nurse dead. Mtembeni Nyatigazi was in a department vehicle and on duty. He was traveling with colleagues to a training session in Durban when they were hijacked. Provincial Health MEC Nomagugu Simelani.
We have been having problems or such problems in the Department of Health in the past few years, but they have not reached the level that we are at now. So we then decided that while we are coming up with a solution, or it might not be a long-term solution, but we needed to suspend the services so that we also protect the health workers. The challenge with such incidences is that they affect individuals within the Department of Health. That is why every time we engage communities, we always say to communities they must protect health workers, because health workers are there to actually take care of them.
Meanwhile, unions say the state vehicles, especially at Ndwedwe, have been targeted for some time now. Public Servants Association spokesperson in the province, Mlungisi Ndlovu.
We cannot allow the public servants to become the number of statistics. Nurses have been hijacked, social workers, even those that work in ambulances have been killed and hijacked in the process. We're asking the question, what exactly that the state is doing? Because our members are being robbed in their workplace, in their home. KwaZulu-Natal is not safe anymore. Over 3,000 cars that have been hijacked in the process between 2022 to 2023. We called upon the National Commissioner, the Minister, the MEC, the society to deal with these criminal activities.
And finally, Nobel Peace Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai says humanity is wounded and has appealed to the global community not to buy in what she calls false notion that the world can only focus on one crisis at a time. Yesterday, she delivered the 21st annual Nelson Mandela lecture in Johannesburg. She says people all over the world must stand together and fight injustices. She also touched on the current conflict in many parts of the world, including the Middle East, Ukraine and Sudan.
The sheer number of crises the world is facing, violence and displacement in Sudan, famine in Yemen, the climate crisis being debated right now at COP28, war in Ukraine, and of course, the unjust bombardment of Gaza, where a child is killed every 10 minutes. So much of humanity is wounded. We must be able to hold space for suffering wherever it is happening in the world.
And recapping our top story this hour, the National Assembly has adopted a report by Parliament's Powers and Privileges Committee that will see 6 EFF MPs suspended without pay for a month. This follows an investigation into an incident during which some MPs, including leader Julius Malema, stormed the podium during the State of the Nation address in February this year. I'll be back with the headlines at the bottom of the hour. For SFM News, I'm Nomalizo Mandela.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM sports headlines, it's soccer action that saw Orlando Pirates beat Morocco Swallows in the Soweto Showdown. And in rugby, the Blitzboks suffer an injury blow on the eve of the Cape Town Sevens. We'll bring you all these stories and more just before 6:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. A couple of areas out with load shedding, which will have an impact. Joburg to Bryanston, and then as you come through Bryanston into parts of Sandton with power out until 8 a.m. this morning. A couple of blocks on the West Rand, so the Greater West Rand block, as well as Florida and Maresburg. Mamelodi's offline. That always causes problems coming out of that side of Pretoria. And Cape Town's Belleville and Epping, Pinelands and Langa. So Belleville will be busy. Also the N7 Jakes Curville Drive passing Langa up into Epping all always gets busy with load shedding as well. And just staying in Cape Town, Baden-Powell, you'll probably find that road closed this morning due to a lot of sand, which is blowing off the coast onto the roadway with big winds yesterday. Baden-Powell obstructed there between Strandfontein Road and Muizenberg. You can possibly factor in some queue time through the divert up through Lotus River and Grassy Park Retreat area. I'm Rob Byrne. SAFM Sunrise starts now.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
8 minutes after 6, good morning to you. Welcome to SFM. Welcome to SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Wednesday morning, the sort of second last real Wednesday of the year, I suppose. And I know I sound a bit like a sort of stuck record on repeat or a stuck song on repeat or whatever it is nowadays. Just talking about the sort of end of the year. I think after this year, it's quite exciting that the year will finally come to an end in many, many ways. I think it really is. I've been spending some time with family. We have family in town, blah-de-blah. You know how it is. Children playing, etc. And I must just say this to you. If you get a chance to spend time with family during the holidays, take it. Just take it. Even if, you know, there's this and that and history and this and then this and and all of that. Just take it. Just go and do it. That would be my message for the morning. Just go and do it. You'll feel better afterwards, really. Spending time with family is so important. And sort of, you know, the sort of one link to your past and your future that you have that stays with it. And especially in these sort of difficult times, I think maybe we're all relying more on our family than we ever have in so many different ways. Lots going on at the moment, of course, and we'll talk a lot more about drinking water. The water that comes out of your tap through the show this morning. 3 reports released yesterday. One's the Blue Drop Report, which looks at the state of drinking water. One's the Green Drop Report, looks at wastewater. And one's the No Drop Report, which looks at places that don't have any water at all. 46% of the drinking water systems are producing water that is, quote, not microbiologically safe, end quote. So in other words, it's not meeting the standard that it should. Now, we'll find out a bit later what that actually means for safety, but it means not meeting the standard that it should. 47% of municipal water is what's called non-revenue water. To put it another way, almost half of our water isn't used. So in other words, if, for example, we had a drought and one of the big dams, I don't know, let's pick the Vaal Dam, right, or Hartbeespoort, wherever it is, one of them is, say, 50% full because there's a drought. You're going to use 25% of that dam's capacity you're going to waste. That's what it means. It means you're going to be using water twice as fast as you actually need to. That's what it means. During a drought, can you imagine? Is it a La Nina year this year? No. Is it an El Nino year this year? Yes. So, you know, this is the kind of stuff that we really need to pay attention to, and we will from 7 to 7:30. I think very important to do. The Chief Justice Raymond Zondo talking yesterday, big judges conference, I think at Sun City, and talking about intimidation and misinformation. And he says this is becoming a major problem. And we see this all the time. And I know that, you know, you'll have strong views on judges one way or another. And that's fine. I'll let you express them. But I keep coming back to this fact. You know, last week, Bantu Holomisa, the leader of the UDM, a person who's played a long and honourable role in our politics, published a report. He said it was an intelligence report. He claimed that it was important, that everyone needed to investigate it. But he had made no attempt whatsoever. It was a report supposedly about judges. But he had made no attempt whatsoever to verify it, as I understand it. The report actually said it was authored by a person called Anthony Brink, who's sort of been completely discredited over the years, was an AIDS denialist many years ago, all of these things. And I mean, if you're going to put a report out, if you're going to talk about judges, if you're going to talk at all, verify what you're saying. I mean, I think it really boils down to that. Verify what you're saying. And if people say things to you, ask questions would be my advice. Just ask questions and keep asking questions, and then you will judge for yourself. You know, you can call it cross-examination if you want to use a judicial phrase. But just ask questions, I think, so important. Paul Mashatile, the Deputy President, talking in Parliament yesterday, sort of commemorating the life of Nelson Mandela. Of course, it was 10 years ago yesterday that he passed away. And he said that, Paul Mashatile said that South Africa is better than it was 29 years ago. Well, I kind of like to hope so. He said load shedding is still a consistent problem, but I think the ANC has a plan. Unfortunately, load shedding's been with us for a very, very long time. It's interesting how many politicians are sort of saying at the moment South Africa is better than it was 30 years ago. I mean, you would expect it to be. I don't know if that's really the sort of way we judge things. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I think that there's all sorts of issues that we need to look at there. In Ngeni, in KwaZulu-Natal, the DA chief whip there councillor Enhlayanza Ndlovu was killed, was murdered. And I mean, there's been so many sort of killings of councillors in KwaZulu-Natal. Your immediate concern is that something has happened and that there's some sort of political link to this. But it's not often, you see there are two parties in KZN who there's really, councillors really are vulnerable to this. The one is the ANC and the other is the IFP. And we've seen that, and there are others, but those are the two main parties. They're also sort of the two bigger parties. But for the DA, quite rare, I think, for one of their members to be murdered in this way. There might be all sorts of complicated reasons for that, but let's see what we can find out a little bit. I think it's quite important. A VBS auditor at KPMG, Dumisani Tsuma, agreed yesterday. He settled with the Independent Regulatory Board for Auditors, IRBA, to pay their fine of 200,000 rand. It's their maximum fine of 200,000 rand, the most they can impose. And what he did was, while he was supposed to be auditing VBS, he had a loan agreement with the bank of 9.7 million rand, and there was no, wait for this, there was no repayment plan. Okay, so it's a loan, but there's no mechanism in the agreement as to how you're going to repay it. I mean, that's just free money, isn't it? That's just a gift. And didn't tell anyone. I mean, it's astonishing. It really is astonishing that kind of thing was happening at VBS. And, I still find there are things about VBS I didn't know, and when I find out, I go, wow, that's amazing. Anyway, this is one of those moments. 9.7 million rand, no way to pay the money back. I mean, just astonishing. And there's a story in Daily Maverick this morning at the Walter Sisulu University has not been able to get its Masters of Medicine degree accredited. And what this means is that the doctors who work in the hospitals around Walter Sisulu University in the Eastern Cape, they would be working there, treating patients while studying their specializations, so pediatric care or oncology or whatever it is. Okay, those are the sort of specializations. And so they treat patients while they do that, which means that because the Walter Sisulu University has lost its accreditation or has not been accredited yet by the Council for Higher Education, there's been a hold-up somewhere, they then go and study somewhere else, which means that there's no one available in the Eastern Cape. And this is a major problem for patients, as you can imagine. And what I found interesting in the story was two things. One, the Council for Higher Education has not sort of explained what's going to happen. There doesn't seem to be any kind of urgency. And the second is that a group of people wrote quite an important letter to the Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Bladen Zamande, and they say that he didn't reply. I sort of wonder if he got it. It's my first sort of thought. Did it get lost in the system somewhere? It's always my first question, because I've seen people have complained often, ministers haven't replied to this or responded to that, and you find out actually they didn't get it. So I do wonder, if that and this can happen quite easily. So I do wonder if maybe that's happened. But I was just a bit concerned around that and the Walter Sisulu University and their medical school. We'll talk a bit more about doctors as we go through the morning. The number 086 000 2032, SMS 41391, tweet SFM Radio, and at Stephen Grootes. Send your WhatsApp voice notes to 0614 104 107. Good morning, good to have you along. It's 6:15.
Aquele.
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 Aquela.
Aquele.
Aquili.
Aquele.
Aquela. No matter how you say it, one thing's for sure, Aquele has been your trusted natural spring water and delicious flavored sparkling drink for 25 years. Celebrating 25 years of refreshment and joy. Thank you, Mzansi, for your support and making us your favorite water brand. Aquele, spreading joy for 25 years.
Sekhukhune United target a win in their own backyard against Stade Malien FC. Meanwhile, the Malian side refused to travel back home empty-handed. This is the CAF Confederation Cup Group D clash. Catch Sekhukhune United versus Stade Malien FC on Sunday 10 December at 8:30 p.m. live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
Nomalizo Mandela, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you, Stephen?
I'm all right, thanks. What's coming up today?
All right. So yesterday, we already know of the arrest of the 5 suspects on the vigilante killing of the 7 people in Diepsloot. the vigilante killing, that gruesome killing of the
terrible
7 people.
thing, yeah.
Right. So the 5 suspects are expected to make their first appearance in the Randburg Magistrate Court today. We are definitely expecting that they might be protesting or picketing outside the court by the community members in support of the 5. You know how Diepsloot, the community has been complaining about the crime issues, so when they're taking matters into their own hands, so they might definitely be there to support their fellow community members. We'll be keeping a definite eye on that to also see if they will be given bail or if it will be postponed. And the next one, another case that has been really taking forever to be finalized, is the case of the 10 men accused of killing 2 Forte University employees. They will be back in court for the finalization of the pending bail application of the 3 of the accused. They are accused of the murder and attempted murder of the Forte fleet manager Petros Roots and Mboneli Vasele, who was the bodyguard of the Vice-Chancellor Professor Sakela Buhlungu. The head of the investigations and vetting of Forte, Isaac Blachi, is the latest person arrested. So that definitely brings in a very interesting development on that. We're going to be following up on it.
It's very important. What else is coming up today?
On the Palapala farm, Saga, one of the accused the accused of the theft at the president's farm, is expected to apply for bail. He's the only one who wasn't given bail. Emanuela David, he's alleged to be the mastermind behind the theft, and his co-accused, as I said, they've already been given bail. So we'll see how that comes up.
Lots going on in courts today. Thanks very much indeed, Nomalizo Mandela. More, of course, from her in a few moments. We'll be listening on the radio, 19 after 6.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Let's have a look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane, partly cloudy, isolated showers, thunder showers in the afternoon. The temperatures, a low of 19, a high of 29. Johannesburg, partly cloudy, isolated showers, thunder showers later, 15 and 26. Vereeniging, partly cloudy, scattered showers, thunder showers later, 17 and 28. Bombela, cloudy, scattered showers, thunder showers, 17 and 22. Polokwane, cloudy in the morning, otherwise partly cloudy, 15 and 26. Mahikeng, partly cloudy, windy, isolated thunder showers, 18 and 34. Vryburg, partly cloudy, windy, isolated thunder showers, 18 and 35. Mangung, partly cloudy, windy, scattered showers, thunder showers, 14 and 31. Kimberley, partly cloudy, windy, isolated thunder showers, 16 and 34. Uppington, fine, 15 and 33. Cape Town, fine, a light and variable wind, 19 and 30. George, partly cloudy in the morning, otherwise fine, a light to moderate easterly wind, 15 and 25. Gqeberha, cloudy, a moderate to fresh easterly wind, 16 and 21. East London, cloudy, scattered showers and rain, a moderate to fresh northeasterly, 15 and 22. eThekwini, cloudy, scattered showers, thunder showers, a moderate southeasterly wind, 16 and 22. Richards Bay, cloudy, scattered showers, thunder showers, a moderate southeasterly wind, 18 and 25. And Pietermaritzburg, morning fog, otherwise cloudy, scattered showers, thunder showers, 14 and 19.
The summer season is here. That means there are more reasons for you to travel and explore Mzansi. South African Tourism, together with the greater tourism industry, are partnering to make travel more accessible and affordable. On our Tourism Thursdays feature on Beyond the Headline, we will be joined by SA Tourism to tell us more about how to travel and get to know Mzansi in a fun and affordable manner this summer season. Tourism Thursday is proudly brought to you in association with South African Tourism.
Eintracht Frankfurt plans to have things their way when they clash with the giants of German football Bayern München. They believe a win is more exciting on home ground, while the Bavarians are gunning for strictly 3 points to settle at the top of the table. This is the Bundesliga, football as it's meant to be. Catch the superb contest between Eintracht Frankfurt and Bayern München on Saturday 9 December at 3 p.m. live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international or global news.
21 minutes after 6. Good morning. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that In his view, only the Israeli Defense Force can be used to disarm Hamas in Gaza, essentially rejecting the idea that an international force or the Palestinians themselves would be responsible for security in Gaza after the current war there. At the same time, the United Nations, now referring to the situation in Gaza as apocalyptic, Israeli soldiers are circling the city of Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza. The United Nations says there is nowhere safe for Palestinians in Gaza at the moment. The Israelis first told Palestinians to move to the south. The UN says there's just nowhere now to go. Over 15,000 Palestinians have been killed. 1,200 Israelis were killed by the Hamas attacks a month ago. Andrew Muse is the General Director of Doctors Without Borders in Southern Africa. Andrew, good morning and thanks for your time.
Stephen, good morning.
Your members are trying to provide some kind of medical care for Palestinians in Gaza. Is it even possible to provide care for so many people at the moment?
I think that description of the situation as apocalyptic is sadly very true. We were able to bring in an emergency team of international volunteers into southern Gaza, and actually we chose to base ourselves in Khan Yunis because it was originally declared a safe zone a week ago, or just before the truce. And our team now are trying to support 2 hospitals in the city, but it is incredibly difficult. I mean, just to give an idea of the situation, on Saturday alone, Al Nasir Hospital, where we work, has 300 beds, but received over 1,000 people requiring serious medical attention for severe injuries. And at Al-Aqsa Hospital, where we also work, again just on Saturday, our emergency room received 10 bodies dead on arrival and another 213 injured coming in one day alone. It's really a situation that no healthcare worker can cope with. We are being overwhelmed.
There was a situation over the last sort of 24, 36 hours. The World Health Organization said Israel had told them to empty a warehouse because that building would not be usable anymore. And I presumed what that meant is that the Israeli Defense Force was going to demolish, they were going to destroy the building. Israel then denied that. The point of this is I can't remember in a conflict before, it may have happened, but I can't remember it, a World Health Organization facility being targeted. Now, this is happening to other UN facilities as well, right?
That's correct. I mean, the UN have spoken about a lot of their workers, their aid workers in the Palestinian Gaza Strip being killed on a regular basis. And I think despite the claims of Israel, this is not just a war against Hamas, but we're really witnessing a war waged on all of Gaza at any cost. And all the people currently in Gaza appear to be a target.
So you need aid, you need workers, you need doctors, you need medical staff, you need all of those medical aid facilities as well. But within all of this is a sort of what I presume is going to be a food crisis. I mean, food needs to be brought into Gaza. And for many people, just getting enough food, and particularly for children, drinking water perhaps too, that must be impossible.
It is. The siege is continuing. Aid workers and our fellow humanitarian actors in other organizations are unable to bring in food, they're unable to bring in water, they're still unable to bring in fuel and medical supplies. And just to say, a report from our team in Khan Yunis sees airstrikes also hitting overcrowded, squalid refugee camps in the city. So the risk of starvation goes up, but actually the risk of infectious diseases goes up, the risk of respiratory disease goes up, and sadly now we've entered winter, so diseases such as pneumonia, as people are living under blankets or tents, also goes up.
Andrew Muse, thank you very much indeed. General Director of Doctors Without Borders in Southern Africa, as you can hear, obviously in touch with his colleagues in Gaza and just painting a picture. That United Nations description, apocalyptic, I think just keeps coming back on the situation there. More coverage, of course, on that situation through the day, and very aware of the strong views that people hold on this conflict at the moment. You were there, SAFM, coming up now to 27 minutes after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Morning.
Bucks beating Swallows, oh dear.
What do you know? It's the Bucks who are clipping the birds. It was the Soweto showdown that took place yesterday. 2-0 was the win. It has been dubbed as the original derby. And of course, Bucks getting the bragging rights against Swallows. It was a DStv Premiership encounter held at Orlando Stadium last night. The home side have stretched their unbeaten run against their oldest rivals to 8 league matches, grabbing maximum points in the iconic fixture for the third time running. Let's listen now to the Bucks boss, Jose Rivero.
61-62, we doubled the lead, and I think from there the game was much more clear in our side. We have the opportunity to score more, but we didn't finish well the game. The last 10 minutes we didn't play good enough. 3 points, important as usually, and quite happy with the performance, even though was not our best game, and we can do it much better.
Now let's go to Ghana. They've qualified for the 2024 Women's Africa Cup of Nations despite losing yesterday's second leg 1-0 away to Namibia in their final qualifier. The Black Queens survived a scare against Namibia's Gladiators to seal qualification for the competition, which will be played in Morocco next year. In return, Ghana to the continental stage after they missed out on qualification for the last tournament that took place in 2022. Now it will be the first time the Black Queens will be playing in the Women's Africa Cup of Nations since they last hosted the event, and that was in 2018. Let's go to soccer action elsewhere. Arsenal 5 points clear at the top of the Premier League after a 4-3 victory for Mikel Arteta's team, while Jurgen Klopp believes it's far too early to talk about the title race given at this stage of the season, but admits Liverpool's late win against Fulham gives them added confidence heading into their match at Sheffield United. The German boss Klopp described his team's ability at scoring late winners as very important, but is not thinking about the title race until April if they are still in this position.
We are 2 points behind Arsenal, by the way, but is that it's decided or what on that front?
You got late winner.
No, yes, of course. No, our late winner was very important, and for everything, absolutely everything. Yeah, that's true, but had nothing to do with a title-winning season. But if you can do that every week, it's pretty like you would win the league.
Let's go to some rugby news coming in. Springbok Sevens prop Christy Grobelaar has been ruled out of the HSBC Sevens in Cape Town this weekend after sustaining an ankle injury. Grobelaar picked up the injury at last weekend's Emirates Dubai Sevens, which was won by the Blitzboks for a 5th consecutive and 11th time overall. Cricket, Kaya Zondo and Neil Brunt both struck half centuries for the South Africa A team against the West Indies A on day one of the third 4-day match at the Mongong Oval in Bloemfontein yesterday. Zondo top scored with 70 of 114 balls as the hosts were restricted to 274 from 67.4 overs in their first innings, with Captain Brandt adding 62. Now, the SAA team made 4 changes to the side that beat the West Indies A in the second match, with batters David Beddingham, Zubair Hamza in for Tony DeZorzi and Keegan Peterson. Seaman Dwayne Olivier and Hardus Viljoen returned for the series decider in place of Tsepo Moreki and Dane Pitt. That's a wrap of your sport for now. Here on Sunrise, we'll bring you more stories, headlines top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. More on our economy, unfortunately shrinking slightly in the third quarter of the year. We'll look at that in the next half hour. It's stage 3 now, stage 4 later. You're with SFM leading the conversation 6:30.
And in the headlines, the Gauteng's division of the High Court's Judge President Dustin Mlambo has rejected allegations of judicial capture. This follows reports of a fake intelligence report allegedly penned by a former intelligence head, Tembisile Majola, on allegations of corruption within the judiciary. In other news, the National Assembly has adopted a report by Parliament's Powers and Privileges Committee that will see 6 EFF MPs suspended without pay for a month. This after an investigation into an incident during which some MPs, including leader Julius Malema, stormed the podium during the State of the Nation address in February this year. And the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has criticized those he says are trying to pressure Israel's military tactics in Gaza. Details on these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. A crash in the wrong place. It's the N1 South, the busy N1 South. It's Sam Rand roads. If you're leaving Pretoria en route to Joburg, traffic starting to backlog heavily back through the Brockfontein interchange into that one. The rest of the highway network's pretty much incident-free and flowing. The R21 looking good out of Pretoria down towards the airport. No dramas this morning between Pietermaritzburg and Durban. That run through is clear. There is a bit of a forecast for rain pretty much all day today in the Durban and surrounding areas, so please drive carefully. Keep road safety top of mind. Cape Town Baden-Powell Drive is closed from Strandfontein through to Coastal Park on the Muizenberg side, and that's due to sand on the carriageway. So there's a lot of pressure coming in on Baden-Powell from the Mitchell's Plain and Khayelitsha side as you queue into Strandfontein. Then you take a busy Strandfontein Road up through, I guess, Lotus River and down through sort of Retreat and Grass Park. You do that in reverse if you're coming out of the Muizenberg area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray McClarker, good morning.
Good morning. Hi there.
Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, both markets are mostly up. The investor focus is on the US labor market. The number of jobs available in the US economy reached 8.7 million in October, which is down from 9.6 million in September. This is a sign that the US labor market is slowing down, and investors are hoping that the US central bank can move to cut interest rates, because if fewer people are in jobs, they will struggle to survive an environment of high interest rates. So US markets were mostly down yesterday, and before the US market officially opens later today, the futures market is up. Nasdaq, Dow Jones and S&P futures are each up 0.3%. In Asian markets, Japan's Nikkei is up 1.8%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is up 0.7%, and China's Shanghai Composite is down 0.1%. And there is further weakness in the rand against the US dollar. The local currency is 18.93.
And then we're at risk of recession. Very bad GDP figures, worse than expected.
Yes, South Africa's economy fell by 0.2% during the third quarter. Manufacturing, mining, and agriculture are sectors that had the biggest decline in productivity and led to the economy being in the doldrums. These sectors are the most exposed to and affected by Eskom blackouts and the logistics crisis in the hands of Transnet. The economy risks being in a recession in 2023. This will happen if the economy's performance also declines in the fourth quarter. This would be 2 consecutive quarters of no growth.
And food inflation is finally easing. Quite a big slump in cooking oil and onion prices.
Yeah, the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group tracks the movement in the prices of food items that are staples in many households. According to the Pietermaritzburg Group, the overall inflation on food fell to 9.9% in November from 10.6% in October. The cost of onions and 5 litres of cooking oil have seen the biggest decline, each falling by 14%. This is in line with economists who expected that food prices would ease by year end.
Ray McClarker, thanks very much indeed. Ray, of course, back in an hour's time.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
Russ Advocate Zipo Mantula, good morning.
Steve, over refreshing morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
In Sudan, negotiations for a ceasefire between the Sudan Armed Forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, they've ended in deadlock. This is very bad news.
This is very worrying, Stephen, for the North African part of the continent, and more so looking at the efforts by the AU, the efforts by the IGAD, Intergovernmental Authority, and as well as the USA that has been engaged in Jeddah, the capital city of Saudi Arabia, where they've been engaging with the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Force. One of the rumors, Stephen, that is coming is that the Sudanese government accused also United Arab Emirates for supporting the Rapid Support Forces. The other issue is that both forces have been delaying to can withdraw from the key towns so that they can build what we call confidence build measures in this conflict. And we are having many refugees, Stephen, since this conflict erupted in April. Now, when you have a stalemate, when you have the talks being put on hold, that will mean that it will still be a long way to go for these two generals to come into agreement, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan as well as General Mohamed Hamdani Dagalo.
And then in Sierra Leone, the government there announcing 43 new arrests in connection with that coup attempt.
That coup attempt of November 26, it brings the number now to 57. We look at 37 soldiers, 10 civilians, 4 soldiers who were being expelled from the army, 5 active police officers, and 1 who retired, Stephen. These are the people that have been named by the office of the Deputy Minister of Information, Yusuf Sandi, yesterday, and not specifying the arrest of these 43 that were arrested this week. But the government still going to be taking action against them, Stephen, because remember, Julius Maada Bio, the president, responded that they will definitely deal with this issue of undermining of the rule of law in Sierra Leone. They will take action against these 57 people who have been arrested of the attempted coup of November 26.
And then in Mauritania, the former president, Mohamed Ould Abdel Aziz, sentenced to 5 years in jail.
Sentenced to 5 years, but his lawyers, they say they will appeal. This is a trial that has been going on for 11 months since January. But when you look back, Stephen, it will date back to 2008. It look back that it was around the issues of money laundering, the abuse of power by the former president, that this trial has taken so long that yesterday he was sentenced to 5 years. And his lawyers are saying that this was a political trial. They will try by all means to appeal this wicked judgment that came out from Mauritania. And this is a challenge, Stephen. Others are saying it is a good sign that even the leaders who come out of power, they can be prosecuted. They cannot claim presidential immunity when they've abused the state power and squandered the state resources.
And then in the DRC, there's an unease and uncertainty for displaced communities in the east of the country.
And the east of DRC, Stephen, if you have been there before, you'll understand your Rutshuru, Masisi, Walikale, the eastern part of DRC. They are worried about these elections, whether they'll be able to vote. 14 days from now, as we're doing countdown, 2 weeks from now, Stephen, is that M23 is still active in the eastern DRC, in Goma, just 20 kilometers outside the capital city of Goma. And now that they are worried, Stephen, is that it appears that the Electoral Commission will not even reach those areas outside Goma for them to cast their vote. It means their right to vote will be waived because of this conflict that has been waged between the M23, the M23, as well as the government of Felix Tshisekedi. Knowing that the East Africa community have been moved out, we are still waiting for the SADC mission to go into the DRC, Stephen. And looking that it's a rainy season also, might be quite difficult to say how do you also access voters who are in the flank rural areas when DRC decides on 2023 in the next coming 2 weeks.
And we'll stay in that country for our archive, the 6th of December 2006.
17 years ago, their president, Joseph Kabange Kabila, the former president Kabila, was inaugurated as the first democratically elected president in over 40 years, where there was no government in the DRC that was clear from Sese Seko to Joseph Laurent Kabila, to his father to son. Now, remember former President Thabo Mbeki, others they said he played a critical role in the inter-Congolese dialogue that was in Sun City in 2001. But Kabila, he has retired, but others are saying still have a push towards Martin Fayula as a candidate to these coming elections in the DRC. Asante Sana SG, as we are still leading the conversation, SAFM.
Ross Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you so much. Of course, back tomorrow morning is from our continent through the day here on SAFM.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
So here's my question for you this morning. When you turn on the tap in your house, does anything come out? Do you trust what comes out or not? I mean, so often people will say to me, I drink bottled water, and I'll be like, why? You live in a city. And that's actually what these reports tell us, the blue drop, the green drop, the no drop report. They tell us actually that in cities the water is fine, in metros. It's smaller places that's really a problem. But do you trust what comes out of your tap, I suppose, is the question. Do you actually drink it? Do you give it to your children? So when water comes out of your tap, does water come out of your tap? And I know in the past we've had complaints over the years from people in Guyana and many places that sometimes they just haven't had water water for ages. And then you get this strange thing in some parts of the country where the water only comes on at like 2 in the morning because the reservoirs finally fill. And people actually leave their taps open with buckets to store it because they're so desperate for water. So where you live at the moment, are you finding that actually there is water? You know the number, 086 000 2032.
It's the celebration of the century, and you're invited. We've already given away almost 3 million rand with 56 daily vouchers won. Buy a new Ford before 31 December, and you could win a 50,000 rand voucher or the grand prize of us paying for your new Ford. Visit your nearest Ford dealer today. TNCs apply.
Polokwane City want to test if Kaizer Chiefs can handle the Limpopo heat. Their plan is to get a comfortable position in the top half, but the Kosi Nation is in a good mood to collect maximum points away from home. Rise and Shine versus Rise Kosi Rise. This is the DSTV Premiership. Polokwane City versus Kaizer Chiefs on Saturday, 9 December at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM 104 to 107. Nationwide.
18 minutes to 7, you know the number, of course. Well, doctors preparing to do their year of community service. So they've qualified, but they're not allowed to be registered until they can actually do their community service. They have to be placed at hospitals. And from what I understand, they still don't know which hospitals they would actually go to. I thought the health minister, Dr. Joe Pagla, had suggested that actually he would say very soon where they would go. But as things stand, they still don't know. Dr. Akhtar Hussain is the chair of the Employed Doctors Advocacy Forum. That's part of the South African Medical Association. Dr. Hussain, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, SFM. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. We've had this problem before. Have any of these junior doctors yet been told where they'll be placed for their year of community service, or are they all still waiting?
No, that what happened last week. They released the placement. There's a two placement. One is for internship for 2 years, and then community service for 1 year. The community service delayed, and it came bits and bits. And the problem they've been facing, that ICSP was given outsource and it was not working. Then they have to do it manually. And what happened, this intern who are going to be community service from 1st of January, they are in this system last 2 years. So why there's a delay and problem? They should have placed by mid-June, July, because they got a personal number, they're working. They just need a simple allocation to community service. But this don't happen every year. Every year. Just before Christmas, they will start allocating. Last night, minister said they placed 9,000 plus internship and community service doctors and other allied health workers. But it's not true. They only placed 2,500 intern and 2,200 community service doctor. So they are mixing up to the community and the people's 9,000. They announced 9,000 we have placed.
Okay.
The problem is the very poor planning. They don't have a capacity in Human Resource National Department of Health. They always come up with a funding issue, challenges in the province that they don't have a fund, and that's a delaying. And the community service are facing now only 2 or 3 weeks left. Where they're going to get accommodation, Department of Health or hospital don't provide community service accommodation.
Okay, Dr. Hussain, we've heard you. And so, I mean, what this means is that some people, for example, could be separated from their families. I read of one case where a person has a 5-month-old baby. She obviously wants to be with her baby. It's really important to know. And the clock is ticking, right? So, I mean, people need to know now. And from what you say, the minister, hasn't been able to confirm where people are moving to.
Exactly. Then this is very, very unfair, a family to be separated. If the doctors have a baby and husband and wife working in one area, for example, in KZN or Cape Town, you cannot place the wife in Pumalanga and husband must go work in KZN. And this is the social issue. Family must not be separated, and there is a process to appeal. There is a system to be in place that when the husband and wife applying with the family or child need a schooling, or they look after their grandmother, they need to be considered. And what happened this year, they only give them few days to appeal and decide where you want to be going and exchanging your placement. That is not acceptable. I think those cases are getting husband and wife separated. This is need to be solved urgently. As the South African Medical Association, those cases must come to SAMA. We will take action on that. If the Department of Health fail to do that, we may take them to the court or take a legal action.
Sure. All right. Quite strong words there. Thank you. Dr. Akhtar Hussain is the chair of the Employed Doctors Advocacy Forum of the South African Medical Association. You can hear the issues that this happens. And we've had similar stories about this, by the way. Every now and then, every couple of years, you have a similar story about this. So quite a weird sort of thing in a way that this keeps happening. It's 13 minutes now to 7 o'clock.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, the confirmation again yesterday of the trouble our economy is in. Our economy contracting or shrinking by 0.2% in the third quarter of the year. In other words, it's not creating jobs. People, in fact, may be losing jobs. Professor Raymond Parsons is an economist at the Northwest University Business School. Professor Parsons, good morning to you. Is this slight contraction because of what I would probably call the usual problems, load shedding, issues around infrastructure?
Yes, good morning to you, Stephen. Look, there have been these multiple cumulative challenges for our economy over the year, of which the three, as you have now emphasized, stand out. That's firstly the Eskom load shedding, where we're obviously still not out of the woods. Secondly, there are the Transnet and the port and indeed the rail problems and the bottlenecks that have seriously disrupted the economy this year. And then thirdly, there's the pressure on households and on businesses of high inflation and high interest rates. So I think that is really making for a somewhat lackluster economy, especially in view of these particular infrastructural constraints.
Is there any reason to believe it will get better? So government has been talking about economic plans for ages. We know government and business are sort of working together on some of the infrastructure issues. There are private partners coming at Transnet. There's a much bigger role for the private sector with electricity. Of course, many people are very upset about that. They don't like privatization, if that's really the right way to call it. Is there any evidence that all of these plans, initiatives, agreements, whatever we want to call them, are going to have any impact and make things better in the next year?
Well, Stephen, I think that the good news is that on the infrastructure front, as you have emphasized, many of the solutions, as I like to put it, lie hidden in plain sight. In other words, these remedies and reforms, which are already in the pipeline, should now be more speedily implemented. I think if there is a message from these growth figures, is that it injects much more urgency into what we need to do to get these things right. You know, Stephen, it's said that indeed procrastination is the thief of time. Well, in South Africa, it's the thief of growth. And that's the proof that we're seeing now. We really must get on with the things that we've committed ourselves to so that next year can be a somewhat better year for our growth outlook.
The President has promised for many years that there'll be a social pact between business, labour and government. I haven't seen that. Does the social pact matter anymore? Have people given up on the idea?
I think at the moment that's probably on the back burner because you'd see, I think next year, if we can reduce load shedding, begin to solve some of the Transnet problems, if we can get inflation down and we hope to get interest rates down, then of course you've got to accept there is going to be an election. I don't think at this point in time one could be talking about a social pact. I think now we're moving into a new year where we want to lay the foundations for better growth, for indeed job-rich growth in the future on the one hand, and we've got to navigate through an election campaign leading up to those elections next year. So I think those are probably the higher priorities at the moment than to talk about a social pact.
Professor Raymond Parsons, thank you. Really appreciate the time from the Northwest University Business School. 9 minutes now to 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Yes, if you're on your way from Pretoria to Joburg, a crash on the M1 South at Samram this morning, pushing traffic back beyond the Brockfontein interchange. You're back towards John Foster Drive. Breakdown on Joburg's M1 North going up to Winnie Mandela. The left lane is closed, so coming through from Randburg, that is slow. And a bit of pressure early this Wednesday, coming in from Ekurhuleni and 12 and R24 routes, both jam into Galuli's interchange. Durban has been a crash near the cement factory, so the N2 North is just under a bit of pressure there. In fact, if you're leaving the South Coast coming up through the Durban area, this queues between Munzamtoti and Prospect, and that section of the N2 is busy. And then you go from the Higginson Highway to the M7, passing that crash, and then you're already stuck in a third queue that extends from the M7 through to the roadworks at the M13 bridge. So you need lots of extra time to get up that N2 North this morning. Higginson Highway out of Chatsworth is very heavily backed from Bayview out towards the N2 Highway. And Cape Town this morning, highways are busy. N1 from Belleville through to Kuburg interchange, N2 from the airport through to Hospital Bend, already looking slow as well, noticeably busier this Wednesday. And the Baden-Powell Drive, which remains closed between Strandfontein and Muizenberg. It's a full closure both directions due to sand on the carriageway, and there's a lot of traffic pressure on the Strandfontein side. That's where the big volume comes in from. So Strandfontein Road, Spine Road and Baden-Powell all backed up as you sort of hit that closure and have to divert north towards Lotus River. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Hello, Michelle. Hope you're well. You know, Mos, I'm not very lekker for online internet shopping things after Uncle Donnie got a second loan on his house to pay for some escort in Portugal's child to go to university. But listen, I'm addicted to this We Buy Cars auctions. Every day you can buy cars. My finger is jikkerig on the smells. I'm going to click anytime now because I want a fancy fast car. But my husband is making me so moeg. I'm sommer listen auction him. I nogal wonder how much I will get.
We Buy Cars, the best place to buy a car by far.
EFC is live this Thursday. 3 incredible title fights in one night. The welterweight strap is on the line as Mark Hume takes on Peace Ngopane. And the most dominant featherweight Iga Cabeza faces the only man he has lost to in 6 years, the Pitbull, Ronaldo Exon. Plus, the finishing machine Humphrey King Cobra Malenga takes on Kaleka Kabanda for the vacant lightweight title. EFC 110, watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
The Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies invites interested individuals and stakeholders to submit written comments on the SABC bill. The bill seeks to repeal the Broadcasting Act of 1999 to regulate the continued existence of the SABC, to provide its governance, to amend the ICASA Act of 2000 and the Electronic Communications Act of 2005. For more information, contact the Portfolio Committee of Communications and Digital Technologies by emailing sabcbill@parliament.gov.za, directed to Hanjiera Sali.
Big stories of the day. #SAFM Sunrise.
Richard's on the line from Mabat. Or Richard, hi, good morning. You want to talk about fighting corruption?
Yes, Stephen. Good morning. This is Bishop Richard Allen Sequai.
Hello, Bishop. Go for it.
Yes, the issue here is human nature is corrupt itself, and not only the South African government. Governments of the world are going to be continuously being corrupt. Now, the worst part of our situation here in South Africa is that you have Mobutu Sese Seko in Zaire, you had Laurent Kabila and his father Joseph, you had Isabella dos Santos in Angola. People in power abuse it for their own benefit. Now, with our situation, it's worse because not only Ramaphosa and Zuma are now billionaires, the rest of them want to become billionaires. And until they all become billionaires, you are going to keep on suffering, my brother.
So what do we do then, Richard?
That's the high price we are paying. The high price we are paying is that we need to understand that human beings are not we're not given the power to rule over one another because we abuse power. We are supposed to be under the governance of the creator of this universe.
Okay, Richard Bishop, thank you for your time this morning. Phoning us from Mabato, 4 minutes to 7.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, the Police Minister Becky Cele in Parliament confirming that nearly 4,000 police officers who've been arrested for various crimes in the last 4 years are still working as police officers. Hasn't explained why they're still, in fact, employed. Richard Mamabolo is the spokesperson for the Police and Prison Civil Rights Union Pop Crew. Richard, good morning. We've known for a long time that the police can't hold police officers accountable. Look at the IPID reports every year. But still, 4,000 police officers who themselves have been arrested are still wearing a uniform. I mean, this is a terrible situation.
Good morning to you and the listeners. Yes, of course, it's quite unsettling that over the past 4 years there have been such reported cases. We know that there have been about 430 convictions which have been secured. But again, I think we also need to as well look into the processes that the SAPS had been following during that period, because there was a process which you called expeditious process, which we have been against because it does not necessarily follow the procedures that need to be taken into consideration when investigating whether policemen and women have been in the wrong or not. But again, I think one of the things that we can take out from this is the fact that as much as there might have been these numbers of police who have been charged, what is actually comforting about the situation is the fact that you still have a lot of police officers, men and women, who have been ensuring that they upkeep the law by actually ensuring that even if their colleagues have been found in the wrong, they are then investigated and charged. And that is the basis of which IPD will be making investigations.
Right, Richard, I'm sorry, but we're not going to look for silver linings here. Surely the police need to actually act. And isn't there a problem with the internal mechanisms within the police? If someone's arrested and they're a police officer, at the very least they should be suspended for a long time. And there's a great example of this because of the police officers working for the VIP protection unit who were seen on video. We've seen it, them assaulting. This is, the current Deputy President Paul Mashatile's detail. These police officers, they are police officers, were seen assaulting motorists on the side of a highway, and yet they're back at work. I mean, isn't this a classic example of the problem?
Look, we're not trying to underline silver linings here. We're trying to actually ensure that at whatever decision is taken, there are proper processes that are followed. And of course, I think we cannot underestimate the fact that these investigations which led to the charging of all these police officers were done by other police officers. So it would be wrong to then suggest that all our police officers are corrupt. In fact, there might be rotten elements. Of course, we need to get rid of them. But a majority of our police officers remain committed to serving the people of South Africa.
Okay, Richard, do you agree that there need to be stronger accountability mechanisms in the SAPS?
We definitely agree on that. There definitely needs to be stronger mechanisms to ensure that we root out all the strong elements.
Okay, and you agree that the current systems aren't working? I mean, it's obvious they aren't working.
There are obviously challenges, and like I had explained, that there is what you call an expeditious process, which we think is unfair in the manner in which it deals with different cases. So those need to be obviously regulated and ensured that they actually are applied in a way that would be fair for both police officers and of course the management.
Richard Mamabolo, thank you. Spokesperson for the Police and Prison Civil Rights Union Pop Crew. Well, interesting conversations, but it's 4,000 police officers, nearly 4,000, who actually have been arrested, who are still wearing a police uniform. In other words, under the law, they would have the power to conduct an arrest themselves under the Police Act. We'll focus on water in the next little while. There's a lot to talk about there, and that'll be a sort of focus for the next half an hour. Also coming up from 8:30, your mediated conversation this morning, COP28 and climate finance. How does all of that work? And why is it called COP? How did that happen? We'll talk about that. You with SFM leading the conversation this Wednesday morning at 7 o'clock. Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 38462. Now that's good news.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Top stories this hour: judicial capture allegations rejected and pressure on Israeli Prime Minister over continued offense in Gaza. Good morning. The Gauteng division of the High Court's Judge President Dustin Mlambo has rejected allegations of judicial capture. This follows reports of a fake intelligence report allegedly penned by a former intelligence head, Thembisile Majola, on allegations of corruption within the judiciary. Whilst the State Security Agency distanced itself from the document, it has been shared on social media and has been used as a reference by political heads. Mlambo, who is named in the report, called for the judiciary to be protected. He was speaking at the sidelines of the official opening of the Judges' Conference in the Northwest.
The legal profession, in its formations, was always on hand to protect the judiciary when things like this happen. That kind of intervention by the legal profession in its formations has sort of receded. It's now up to legal NGOs, sometimes who take up the cudgels and defend the judiciary when these unfair allegations are made. I would hope that the legal profession, which feeds into the judiciary, would go back to basics. It would be very untidy for us to engage blow by blow with these things when they could eventually end up in our courts.
The National Assembly has adopted a report by Parliament's Powers and Privileges Committee that will see 6 EFF MPs suspended without pay for a month. This follows an investigation into an incident during which some MPs, including leader Julius Malema, stormed the podium during the State of the Nation address in February this year. The committee had found Malema Chief Whip Floyd Chivambu, Marshal Dlamini, Senawo Tambo, Vuyani Pambo and Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi guilty of being in contempt of Parliament. Chairperson of the committee, Violet Siwela, explains the sanctions.
The committee recommends that the National Assembly impose the following penalties with respect to the 6 affected members in order to apologize in person in the House to the President, the Speaker, and the public of South Africa. Suspension of the members without remuneration for a period of 30 days, starting from the 1st to 29 February 2020.
A security guard has been shot dead during a shootout with a group of armed robbers at Leboagomo in Limpopo. Police say the guard was responding to a robbery at a cash loan business when a shootout ensued. Police spokesperson Shulani Mashaba says the group of robbers fled with an undisclosed amount of money. Mashaba says one of the robbers was wounded but was helped by fellow gang members to flee the scene.
The victim had responded to a robbery in progress at a cash loan company at Leboagomo shopping complex outside Glukwan when he was shot. According to the preliminary information, 4 suspects stormed into the company and demanded cash at gunpoint. They then took an undisclosed amount of cash, and when the security officer arrived at the scene, a shootout ensued, resulting in the suspects shooting him. The 48-year-old security officer was wounded and was certified dead on the scene.
The bail application of a University of Fort Hare senior official, Isaac Blakkies, will be heard in the Dimbaza Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape today. Blakkies, who is the university's head of investigations and vetting services, is amongst the 10 people facing charges of murder and attempted murder. The application could not be heard on Friday as his new legal representative needed time to familiarize himself with the case. He is charged in connection with the murders of 2 university staff members, Fleet Manager Petrus Roots and Vice-Chancellor's bodyguard Mboneli Vesele. The state is expected to oppose the bail application. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai has commended South Africa for being able to fight apartheid and freeing citizens from oppression. Malala was delivering the 21st annual Nelson Mandela Lecture in Johannesburg. She called the oppression of women and girls gender apartheid. She called on world leaders to codify what she terms gender apartheid with the purpose of drawing attention to women and girls in Afghanistan to be free.
I call on every government in every country to make gender apartheid a crime against humanity. We have an opportunity to do that right now. The UN is currently drafting and debating a new Crimes Against Humanity treaty. This is the moment for world leaders to stand with Afghan girls and women. Adding and adapting language on gender apartheid to the treaty will codify it under the international law. Member states like South Africa can play an important role in championing this cause.
And in the Middle East, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has criticized those he says are trying to pressure Israel's military tactics in Gaza. His remarks come as the IDF is engaged in the heaviest day of fighting since the start of the war in Gaza. The BBC's Paul Adams has more.
With American officials starting to voice disquiet about Israel's tactics, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had words for those who he said were trying to pressure Israel. The only way to finish the job quickly was to use crushing force against Hamas. That approach is once again killing large numbers of civilians and sending others fleeing for safety. In a meeting earlier with recently released hostages and the families of those still being held by Hamas, the Prime Minister found himself under attack. In a leaked recording of the meeting, one former hostage, who hasn't been identified, accused Mr. Netanyahu of putting politics above the safe return of the remaining 138 hostages.
And recapping our top story this hour, the Gauteng Division of the High Court Judge President Dustin Mlambo has rejected allegations of judicial capture. This follows reports of a fake intelligence report allegedly penned by a former intelligence head, Tembisile Majola, on allegations of corruption within the judiciary. I'll be back with the headlines at the bottom of the hour. For SFM News, I'm Nomalizo Mandela.
Nomalizo, thank you. Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out. Is balancing your income statement harder than finding a spot on a popular Durban beach over December? Outsurance is so confident that they can beat your car insurance premium that you can ask them for 500 Rand if they can't. That's a monthly saving on your current premium or 500 Rand cash. Claim free and with the same insurer for 3 years, ask for 1,500 Rand. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. That's out to 38462. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. Soccer and its Women's Africa Cup of Nations qualifier means Nigeria becoming the final side to book their place at the 2024 tournament, and Formula One announcing 6 sprint venues for the 2024 season. All this and more just before 7:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Quite heavy this morning into Joburg on the Mike 1. Queues between Gold Reef City and the Empire Road exit. The N3 going north, quite heavy as well. You'll sit in traffic from Elands Interchange right through to Modderfontein Road as you get up past the Edenvale area. Pretoria this morning, not too bad, actually. The sort of local traffic is all right. Just a little bit of a backlog on the bottom of the Montpellier Highway onto Eskia and Pathladi. Coming off the south coast of Durban, on your way through towards the Umgeni Road, if you like. 2 queues to work through this morning. Amansam Toti through 20 Hill on your way to Prospectum, very slow, and also the N2 between the cement factory and the M13, extra heavy delays up through the roadworks. Also the Higginson Highway out of Chatsworth, very heavy this morning from Bayview down towards the N2. That may be some load shedding related issues. Cape Town, plenty of pressure on the N7. There's some load shedding passing Langa up into Epping, and then traffic all over the Jakes Kerville 4 Tracker Road junction right in the heart of Goodwood. And Baden-Powell stays closed between Strandfontein and Muizenberg because of sand on the carriageway. Full closure both ways. All the pressure this time of morning is through that Strandfontein area. That side very heavy. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
10 after 7, good morning. You're with SFM Sunrise, Wednesday morning. I'm Stephen Grootes. Yes, I know, not that much longer until the end of the year, and things will sort of slow down, of course. I think many people are looking forward to that. A big focus on water for you in the next half an hour, and just the water that comes out of your tap, whether you can use it. Is it always going to be this way? How much we're losing so much of it. And we'll focus on that and just try and explain, understand all of that. Issues around COP28 and climate and how it all works. I'm fascinated by it, and I'm a big sort of believer that if you want to change something, you have to get the economics right. You know, you have to harness that, and I realize that that's sort of contested terrain. Got the big role for government in all of this, but a big role for economics too. And we'll look at that, actually, climate financing. We'll look at that in the next little while as well during your mediated conversation. All of that to come. You with SFM, you know the number, 086 000 2032. It's 11 after 7.
You see,
Change happens, and it improves our lives. Change is good. It opens doors to new horizons and leads to a more informed tomorrow. Being in the know is no longer for the selected few. Information is for all of us to enjoy, whenever, wherever. Sunday World, putting the latest stories, sports results, exclusive video content, and celebrity news at your fingertips. To stay informed, download the Sunday World app today. Available on the App Store and Google Play. Sunday is just the start.
Brighton and Hove Albion are going all out to brighten their clash against Burnley FC with maximum points.
At Digmer again, that was a masterpiece.
However, Burnley FC will display a sense of urgency to move up from the relegation zone.
Ariola has scored! Down the middle! Burnley lead! Shane Rodriguez!
Who will have a great day on the field of play? The Seagulls or the Clarets? This is the Premier League. Catch the exciting clash between Brighton and Hove Albion and Burnley FC on Saturday, 9 December at 4 p.m. live on S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag we love it here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Agenda-setting conversations of the day.
12 after 7, good morning. The Water Affairs Minister, Senzo Mchunu, has now released 3 reports which show nearly half of our drinking water systems are producing water which is described as not microbiologically safe. The reports also show that 47% of the water that goes into municipalities is non-revenue water. To put that in another way, 47% of the water that moves from dams is not being used. It's lost through leaks. This is drinking water, by the way, that is lost. Also, big differences in how councils manage water. In KwaZulu-Natal, 60% of our drinking water is lost. In the Western Cape, it's 27%. The 3 reports are the Blue Drop Report, which looks at drinking water, the Green Drop Report, which looks at wastewater, and the No Drop Report, looking at places with no drinking water at all. We start this morning with one of the people who wrote that report. Aisha Latha is an AHL director and a water scientist. Aisha, good morning and thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to your listeners this morning.
Firstly, when the report says water is not microbiologically safe, what does that mean?
That means that the water does not meet the requirements for microbiological safety, which is a measurement of pathogens in the water. So that means it doesn't meet the limits that is outlined according to the World Health Organization as well. If you do drink the water, there is a possibility that you can get sick, and therefore the water is not safe.
Okay, so it doesn't mean it's necessarily dangerous, but this is the standard, and a lot of our water, 47% of our water, 46% of our water, isn't actually meeting that standard.
Yes, that's true. Because remember, the limits are set by the World Health Organization to determine what is the minimum requirement to ensure that the water is safe. So that is not met. So the 46% of the systems do not meet that requirements. And the risk obviously is associated with health, especially to, your sensitive groups like your older people, people living with disabilities, etc. So the water is not deemed safe to drink.
From what I can see, there's been a huge change over the last 8 years or so, from around 2014. Has this been quite a big decline in that period?
The results speak for themselves. It is a big decline, and it may be attributed towards the fact that there was no blue drop and green drop audits that were taking place during that time. So there wasn't any reporting taking place. The drops have been resumed, which is definitely a positive for the industry and for the consumers as well.
One of the big things that we see is that in bigger cities, so metros, it seems water is safer. In smaller places, it's not so safe. What can we learn from that? Is this about resources, managing resources and managing water?
One of the root causes that were identified also by the DG is that the lack of maintenance, lack of operational staff, and lack of maintenance as well. Remember, operating and monitoring a large number of rural schemes is much more difficult because you require more resources to get the chemicals on site, to get the people on site, and to do the monitoring as well. So it is more difficult, to manage a large number of smaller systems than to manage one system. So, for example, Rainwater is excellent in its water quality management. Remember, they have 2 or 3 large plants which supply the bulk of Gauteng. So they have the opportunity to pool all the resources in those plants. So they have excellent process controllers, supervisors, they've got staff, they've got monitoring, access to chemicals, maintenance teams as well. So yes, it is challenging if think about it, if you have to operate a large number of plants located in very remote areas.
Does that also mean then it's actually much harder to fix the more remote areas? It's going to be much harder for those municipalities with spread out populations to actually resolve the problems that they have.
Obviously, because they would require more resources. Like I said, remember, at every treatment plant, they would need a dedicated process controller. They would need a supply of chemicals. They would need to get monitoring. Some of the issues, if you look at the Blue Drop report and you see the lack of monitoring that is taking place in the province, is also an issue, because to get to the site to collect the sample and then to deliver it to a laboratory that is located maybe a few hundred kilometers away and get it within the time frame that the sample is still viable is also a challenge to these municipalities that are located in rural areas.
Aisha Latha, thank you. AHL Director and Water Scientist, one of the scientists who worked on this report. You were with SAFM 17 minutes after 7. Dr. Ferial Adam is a manager at WaterCan, part of Outer. Dr. Adam, good morning to you and thank you for your time. The fact that 47% of our water is now non-revenue water, 47% of our water is lost due to leaks, and we're a water-scarce country. This is really a very bad situation.
It is indeed. I mean, I think, Stephen, before just to clarify, it's 46% is being lost, but it's not all of it through leaks. So non-revenue water is leaks. It's also non-billable water and also theft of water. So all of that combined then becomes the 40. But it's still a high number to be losing that amount of water and not being able to account for it, because it actually means loss of revenue for the municipalities.
I mean, in KZN, that figure's actually, I think, 60%. So most of its water is not being paid for.
Yes. And it's falling out of the system, basically. Yeah.
How does that, how does it even get to that level?
So that's it. It's a lot of what Aisha was saying, is that there's just, a lack of enforcement, a lack of skills at municipal level. And then also we know this. If we look at those years when the reports were not being released, it's those years of state capture, corruption, mismanagement. And that allowed it to get this bad. Hammanskraal should not have happened, Stephen. There was money to fix the system there, and that money has gone. So it's a countrywide kind of issue around lack of skills, corruption, mismanagement of funds.
There's a huge disparity. So KwaZulu-Natal loses 60% of its water. The Western Cape, it's only 27%. And we've already seen how, for example, there's a structural reason why it is much harder to manage water in a more remote area with a spread out population than it is, for example, in Gauteng. Is there a structural reason why KZN is losing so much water and the Western Cape is losing so much less water?
No, I think part of that is, structurally plays a role, but part of it is also the management of these wastewater treatment plants and water treatment plants. So that plays a very big role in the wastage, in the management, and actually how the cleaning of the water.
We've known for a long time that our water infrastructure is failing. And I mean, we see it so often ourselves when you turn on a tap and nothing happens. These reports, obviously, they're very important. They were stopped for a while. They're very important to know what's really going on. Is there any indication that the situation is going to improve?
I agree with you. These reports, I must say, I have to commend the department. These are honest reports, as honest as it can get when it's coming from government. But I don't think it's going to get better before it gets, I think it's going to get a little bit worse before it gets better. I think that the department, as we have presently, have put in a lot of effort around this. They have mechanisms. They're even putting amendments to legislation. But what worries us as civil society is that the stability of this. So, for 10 years, the department was in a mess. Next year's an election year. What happens if that minister changes? Do we know for sure that the top management will be in that position to continue the work that has been started? Because that's my fear. If we get a leadership or we get someone else that moves in there, doesn't know what's going on and starts from scratch or just ignores issues that are important, then it takes us backwards. And that could be a big disaster for our water and sanitation.
So, in other words, you say it might get a bit worse before it gets better, and getting it better, in the best case scenario, will take a long time.
It will, and it needs stability and leadership. And I think for the first time in 12 years, that seems to be there. But we also need a lot more people on the ground, so ordinary people, to continue being the eyes and ears. So if you see a leak that's going on for 3 days, that's the kind of water losses we need to avoid. And if you're in Joburg, you see that all the time.
Dr. Ferial Adam, thank you very much indeed. A manager at Water Can, which is part of the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse, out at 22 minutes after 7. Professor Anya du Plessis is an expert on water management and associate professor at UNISA. Professor du Plessis, good morning to you and thank you for your time. So we have what I suppose we could call a big national crisis. We've heard from Dr. Adam that we need a sort of consistency, we need consistent leadership. What kind of plan do we actually need to fix our water systems in so much of the country?
Look, good morning to you and your listeners. For us to basically recover from this or try to address the numerous issues, we basically have to have a proper refurbishment of everything. At the end of the day, if we look at the statistics, it's not acceptable. Which is of great worry to me is the majority of the municipalities. We know that over 50% of them, do not supply suitable drinking water according to SANS 241. But of those, 57% don't even notify their water users of water quality being compromised. So that's an issue. And Dr. Adams spoke about skilled people at the right places. The report, unfortunately, also shows that there's a total shortfall of 400 qualified persons, consisting of 203 technical staff and 197 scientists, with most of the staff working at these water treatment works, like 67% without any training. That is a major red flag. We cannot improve our systems if we do not have proper management and informed people at the right places.
So 63% of people working in some of these water systems have had no training whatsoever?
67%, yes, according to the reports.
Wow. Just to get the right people with the right skills, I mean, we need to start training people first. I mean, that's a 2, 3, 4 year process. In other words, even in the best case scenario, we're really looking at a long national effort to try and get this right. And in the meantime, and I hate to say this, in the meantime, we're moving away from a rainy period and possibly into a less rainy period.
Exactly. So you're basically going to sit with our rivers are already in a dire state due to continued pollution, non-enforcement, and then just total neglect. If we are faced now, as you say, with El Nino on its way, already there, expecting below average rainfall, and if we do fall within a drought period again, like we had between 2015 and 2018, these statistics are going to be worse. Our water quality is going to be worse once more because the dilution factor isn't there anymore, which will then also increase the costs of having to treat this water to get to a suitable standard.
Is there any idea of how much fixing all of this would cost? I mean, and there's so many different things that need fixing, Eskom, Transnet. But if, for example, someone had to try and work out a budget for the next 10 years to fix our water systems, is there any way of working that out? And I realize each council has its own issue, each water board has its own issue. But is there any way of working out how much money we're going to need to spend as a country on this?
A lot. I think the estimated figure is about close to or more than 100 billion rand or something like that, just over the forward thinking of 5 years. That's thinking, excluding the training of people, putting experts in the right positions. That basically just looks at fixing the water supply systems as they are at this point in time. Yes, our infrastructure is old. Some of the pipes that we have in Joburg is more than 100 years old. However, we can't blame that. If we look at the reports as a whole, the whole water supply system is basically in a mess, and that's primarily due to continued neglect, the dark ages that Dr. Adams also referred to from 2014. And yes, we commend the Department of Water and Sanitation for the transparent reports. However, it's now time that we see action and accountability. For so many water supply systems and local municipalities just carrying on being below in a critical state, this just doesn't only affect the environment, it affects actual human health, and it's also against legislation. So they at this point in time not complying with Section 27 of the Constitution, which says that we are all have to have the right to safe and clean water, and then obviously the environment, Section 24 as well. So the Department of Water and Sanitation now needs to show some teeth and incorporate some accountability.
Professor Anya du Plessis, thank you. An associate professor at UNISA and an expert, as you can hear, on water management. 27 after 7.
Beyond the headline on SAFM.
So what sort of interventions should we be seeing?
Crime is usually linked in poorer communities to poverty. Not a direct correlation, but in the absence of having jobs, in the absence of having good income, etc., people tend to get frustrated, and I think some of that frustration, boredom, anger, etc., plays itself out in criminal activities.
Professor Nirmala Gopal, who is a criminologist.
Beyond the headline with Aldrin Sampier on SAFM. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m. This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. And what's happening with the Women's Africa Cup?
Yeah, Nigeria joining South Africa, Ghana and others in qualifying for the WAFCON 2024. They defeated Cape Verde 2-1 away from home, clinching a 7-1 aggregate victory. Now, Barbara Banda was among the Zambia top scorers as the Copper Queens, who finished third at last year's Nations Cup. They beat Angola 6-0 at home to complete a 12-0 aggregate win. And the two-time champions, Equatorial Guinea, they'll miss out on the 12-team finals following a 2-1 defeat away against DR Congo, which saw the host progress 3-2 overall. Closer to home, Orlando Pirates claiming bragging rights in the original derby with a 2-0 win against Morocco Swallows in their DStv Premiership encounter. It took place at Orlando Stadium last night. Now we go abroad where Pep Guardiola is sharing his thoughts ahead of Manchester City's trip to Aston Villa in the English Premier League, insisting there's no need for playing mind games with former assistant Mikel Arteta during this season's title race. Last season's treble winners, City, have tied their last 3 league games. That has seen them fall 3 points behind Arteta's league leaders, Arsenal. But Guardiola believes the drop points mask good performances.
My feeling today, we're going to win the Premier League. Today, if you ask me, we're going to win the Premier League. If we play in the level so Liverpool and Tottenham, we are going to win it again. The people don't believe it already for 3 draws. But, yeah, we're going to do it again, knowing that it's not easy. No team have done it yet, so that's why the difficulty is there. So it was last season, it was this season, but if you ask me today what you're feeling, we're going to do it again.
Man City boss Pep Guardiola on Sunrise. Now, Erik ten Hag, he's defended Manchester United's decision to ban sections of the media from his press conference and has said that there's no disorder behind the scenes. Ahead of tonight's Premier League clash with Chelsea, 4 journalists were banned from attending Ten Hag's pre-match briefing, and they had published stories describing disharmony in the dressing room. And Erik ten Hag was asked if at all the stories prompted the bans were true. This is what he had to say.
Of course, when there are always in every team players who are not of less playing, less happy, but not different as normal. And such tensive fields you need that. and they have to they wait for the chance, and they can come. But no, there are no issues.
We'll have more sport on Sunrise with the headlines top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. The situation around re-offenders, why people who leave prison end up going back there and committing more crimes. We'll talk about that in the next half hour. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Stage 3 now, stage 4 later, 7:30.
And in the headlines, spokesperson for the Amazulu King, Prince Africa Zulu, says all political parties are welcome to seek blessings from the Zulu monarch. He made the comments after EFF leader Julius Malema visited Amazulu King, Mrs. Zulu Kazwelithini in Ulundi in northern KwaZulu-Natal. In other news, the Gauteng division of the High Court Judge President Justin Mlambo has rejected allegations of judicial capture. This follows reports of a fake intelligence report allegedly penned by a former intelligence head, Tembisile Majola, on allegations of corruption within the judiciary. And one of the accused in the theft at President Cyril Ramaphosa's Palapala farm is this morning expected to apply for bail at the Bela Bela Magistrates Court. 39-year-old Emanuela David is alleged to be the mastermind behind the theft of over $500,000 at President's farm. Details on these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Pretty slow on the N1 coming out of Soweto through to Sunninghill this morning. Queues through Gordon Road up towards Bayers Nordier, and then another queue through Malabongwe up towards William Mandela past a broken down vehicle, and then on towards Rivonia. So if you're leaving Soweto or coming out of Rudaport, just give yourself some time to get through there. N3 looking fairly heavy as well from Elan's Interchange all the way through to London Road up in the Alex area, and the N1 running south this morning out of Pretoria through to Joburg. There's a slowdown coming into the roadworks at the R21. Not a big backlog, but a slowdown. And then it just gets heavy as you come through Brockfontein down all the way to New Road. Olifantsfontein and New Road out of Midrand, driving east towards the M1 highway, both backlogged as well. Durban, some rain across the region for most of today. Light rain is the forecast, so prepare to drive carefully. There's some queuing pressure again on the N2, running north up through Spaghetti Junction. The backlog from the M7, it is easing, but it's still heavy. M13 coming through Kloof down Fields Hill, looks like an issue down towards the midsection of the hill. And Cape Town Baden-Powell Drive still closed both ways between Strandfontein and Muizenberg due to sand on the carriageway. That's put a lot of pressure on the Strandfontein side. Routes like Baden-Powell driving into the closure, Spine Road in towards Strandfontein, then Strandfontein up through Pelican Park and Lotus River. Very heavy with all that traffic detouring. The N7 worth a mention as well. Some load shedding through the Epping and Lunga area. Northbound delays there. And just again busy around the N7 Trekker Road junction in Goodwood. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray McClark, morning again. Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, both markets are mostly up. The investor focus is on the US labor market. The number of jobs available in the US economy declined by nearly 1 million in October compared with September. Investors are hoping that the US Central Bank can move to cut interest rates. Now that the labor market is slowing down, US markets were mostly down yesterday, and before the US market officially opens later today, the futures market is up. Nasdaq, Dow Jones and S&P futures are each up 0.2%. In Asian markets, Japan's Nikkei is up 1.9%, Hong Kong's Hang Seng is up 0.7%, and China's Shanghai Composite is down 0.2%. And our local market, the JSE, was down 1% yesterday. The shares of mining companies were mostly down.
And the state's bad record in paying businesses, it's getting worse.
Yeah, the national and provincial government departments continue to pay businesses late for services rendered. Government departments pay businesses well over the stipulated 30 days. This impacts the financial viability of businesses and their ability to grow and create jobs. According to Business Day, so far in 2023, government departments paid out about 160 117,000 invoices, well beyond the 30 days. These invoices, which were paid late, had a value of 1.1 billion rand. For the tardy payments, government departments have blamed poor internal controls, lack of internal capacity, and budget constraints.
And then our biggest taxi financier, SA Taxi, they've got a restructured debt worth 5 billion rand. Sure.
Yeah, SA Taxi is a company that offers loans to taxi drivers and owners who then purchase minibus taxis that are used to transport commuters. SA Taxi is majority owned by Transaction Capital, and SA Taxi has outstanding debt worth 16.7 billion rand. Of this debt, about 5 billion rand has to be immediately paid. SA Taxi is in talks with its lenders to restructure the debt and possibly pay it later. If SA Taxi fails to do so, it will face the prospect of closing its doors permanently.
Ray McClark, thanks very much indeed. Ray, of course, back tomorrow. More business news through the day here on SFM.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Let's start with Mulatelo in Limpopo. Mulatelo, hi. The issue of water, go for it.
Yeah, how are you, Steve?
I'm well. Talk as loudly as you can, please, Mulatelo.
Yeah, man. You know, I mean, it's a challenge, you know, at my area. I'm living at a rural area. They call it Motong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in those old days, there used to be this pumping machine used diesel. Now, and then the government of the day, they took it to another area, saying they will replace it with another machine. And then I can tell you, Steve, since that machine has left some 10 years ago, we are struggling with water.
Sure.
We used to have water. That machine can pump the water with the same same speed, 24 hours. You know, all the villages were supplied with water. Now, the other thing is that there was a contractor that came to our area, which is now Watten, putting the new pipe system under the ground, but that pumping the pipe that he erected underground has never get heaven water.
All right.
They put the other one. It's 3 pipes underground that has been placed by the government, and then remember they tender the system. So all these 3 types of pipes underground never have water. Even now, as I'm speaking, we don't have any water.
Well, let's
now we struggle.
Yeah,
we struggle to communicate with the relevant people for them to have our machine back. But they take us from one pole to one another.
And this was 10 years ago the machine went to another place?
Actually, it's more than 10 years.
And do you know, is it working in that other place?
No, it's not.
Sure.
It's not. I mean, Steve, you know, these people, if they want to steal money, they go for a blank. They go for blank contract. You know, they can tender or advertise the tender for something else that is they know that they just want to blind us, but not be materialized.
All right.
That's how they steal money.
Yeah. Well, Mulatelo, it's a terrible story. Thank you. On the line from Limpopo there. I'm sure there are other stories that, like Mulatelo, where people just, resources are sort of taken and nothing happens. And we've had calls like this before, people just desperate for water. Mulatelo, I'm sorry. Mac and Etiquini, hi. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning, Stephen and your listeners. I just want to weigh in on the kind of training, and I do agree with one of your speakers that spoke around the training, the skills that has been drained. There's nothing happening. What is happening in terms of government? They're doing short little courses. It's not a problem, but most of the people who does this training are probably not accredited. They might not be experts in the water. So what do you put out if somebody doesn't know what he's doing?
Yeah.
And that's one of our biggest problems. In eThekwini, you find that most of our waterways is in ruins. There's nothing happened. And the blame that we put on at the moment is about the floods that have happened. But irrespective of the floods, we don't have what we need. And that's all I want to say.
Yeah.
We need to retrain. We need to retrain, find the correct people so that the skills can be imparted once again, number one. Number two, also in terms of the leagues, it needs to declare a war on leagues, and it needs to be a quicker turnaround time.
Yeah.
Get the right people for the right job.
It's all about skills, isn't it, Mac and Durban? Thank you very much indeed. Wonga in Matatiel, about boreholes. Wonga, hi.
Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well.
Hi to SFM listeners. You know, Stephen, we will always complain and then cry about water, while we know that the actual problem is the ANC, because where they govern, they cannot do a service delivery except for lip service. You know, here in Matatiel, let me tell you about my village. I'm staying in a place called Fobane. There was a scheme that was started in 2012 at an amount of 86 million rand. That scheme, apart from the other extension, is not yet complete. We don't have water. The scheme at the present moment, it's on 306 million. So I think it's important if you can call Minister Senzo Mchunu to go and do a research of what is actually happening in Alfred. You hire someone for your own personality to do a borehole for 48,000. The boreholes under the district municipality, which is Alfred district, are done for about 200,000, 300,000. Instead of getting water, you get dust.
Sure.
The only water that comes out is when they test. Tomorrow or the same day afternoon, there's no water.
Yeah.
You go to Ward 25 in St. Paul, at Sita area, there's no water. The boreholes are dry, but the money is gone.
Sure.
So we will always complain as people of South Africa, but we know where is the problem. And then the same problem that we know is the one that the people are voting the same problem into power to make sure that the water scarcity continues because they trust what has liberated them. We're no longer wanting liberation now. We want service delivery.
All right, Wonga
That
in...
is the problem we are having with our people.
All right, Wonga and Matatiel, I've heard you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, so many stories coming out around this and how you resolve it. 17 minutes to 8.
Sekhukhune United target a win in their own backyard against Stade Malien FC. Meanwhile, the Malian side refused to travel back home empty-handed. This is the CAF Confederation Cup Group D clash. Catch Sekhukhune United versus Stade Malien FC on Sunday 10 December at 8:30 p.m. live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The 17th annual Chief Albert Luthuli Memorial Lecture will be delivered by former University of Cape Town Deputy Vice-Chancellor Professor Thandabantu Nhlapo on Saturday the 9th of December 2023 at 11:30 a.m. and streamed live on the Luthuli Museum and UKZN Facebook and YouTube platforms. The theme for this year's lecture will be Customary Law and the SA Legal System, a role for the courts, the legislature and civil society. The annual Luthuli Memorial Lecture is a partnership agreement between the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, the Luthuli Museum, the Luthuli Foundation and the University of KwaZulu-Natal. For more information, please contact Zintle Nyembe on 032 559 6824. You can email at profficer@luthulimuseum.org.za or visit www.luthulimuseum.co.za or contact Pan Adams on adamsp@ukac.za.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, it's just by the way, while I talk to you, confirmation for me in the last couple of moments that the Minister of Water Affairs, Senzo Mchunu himself, will actually be on your radio this morning. He'll be on the talking point with Kathy from 10 to 11 today. So if I were you, I would listen to that if you can. From 10 to 11 this morning, Senzo Mchunu on the talking point. One of the strange stories we've been talking about with police officers a moment ago about an hour ago now, around how many police officers have actually been arrested and are still in the police service. But I don't know if you've ever thought about how often it is that you hear of someone who is already a repeat offender. And there's research that shows 9 out of the 10 people who are convicted of crimes and go to prison in South Africa, 9 out of 10 of them will actually re-offend. In other words, they'll commit more crime. In other countries, it's much lower. In Finland, only 1 in 3 do that. Casper Lerter is a research fellow at Northwest University. Casper, good morning and thanks for your time.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
What happens in our prisons? Why is it that we have such a high re-offending rate?
Look, the South Africa's Department of Correctional Services have a mission statement that involves rehabilitation and reintegration. But I think it's become redundant, unfortunately, over the years. And it's not just DCS's fault. They do what they can. The Chinese experience, I did my PhD on the Chinese prison system and what we can learn from them. The Chinese experience has shown very clearly that the community involvement in the reintegration and the rehabilitation of offenders are absolutely essential. Every time a person discriminates or ostracizes an ex-offender, and I'm speaking specifically to your South African audience, we are contributing towards our high and unsustainable rates of reoffending. The big problem in South Africa is the marginalization and stigmatization of ex-offenders. It's known as a stigmatization, a shaming culture, and it's a huge problem in fueling reoffending.
I know, for example, and different countries have different cultures about this. So we have this culture of stigmatizing people who've been to prison. So does the United States. Finland doesn't. Other countries have it to a lesser extent. Why do some countries have this culture and some countries don't? Has anyone been able to work that out?
I'm not exactly sure what the reason is. I mean, South Africa has a high percentage of Christians. I think as many as 70% of South Africans consider themselves Christians, and yet there's such a huge feeling of unforgiveness towards people who have done wrong.
I've been told in
the interesting thing.
Go on.
Yeah, sorry.
No, please go on.
I just wanted to say that countries like China and Japan and many African cultures have integrative shaming cultures where offenders are treated with respect and dignity, even though they've done wrong. But the thing is, treating them in this way, remonstrating with them about the wrongs they've done, has had enormously positive feedback in terms of getting them to rehabilitate and reintegrate. But every time we discriminate and we ostracize ex-offenders, we're actually rejecting them from mainstream society. They can't find jobs, they can't set up support structures, and they are forced to go back to a life of crime. We are responsible for this.
I've been told in the past, Casper, that in fact prisons are schools for criminals, and I don't know if this is true. In other words, a young man, usually a young man, will go into a prison for a first offence. Maybe they stole something, maybe they stole several things. And then actually in prison they're taught to become a criminal. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. And unfortunately, a recent research has shown that many people who end up in prison are from broken homes. So that's that dynamic as well. It's a vicious cycle. Unfortunately, DCS does what they can, but it's not only up to them, as I indicated. It's also government's duty to make sure that this area of conflict, in other words, the stigmatization, ostracization of ex-offenders, needs to be addressed. Government has a responsibility towards us to clear up this area of conflict because it leads to huge amounts of crime. And South Africans are just fed up of the cycle of violence and crime. So government has a responsibility, DCS has the responsibility, and the community at large has a responsibility.
Casper Letter, thank you. Research Fellow at the University of Northwest. Really do appreciate the time. 10 minutes now to 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's pretty sluggish out of Soweto through to Sunning Hill this morning. There's some queues on the N1 moving through 14th Avenue. More queues just after Bayers Nordier, and then a backlog through Malabongwe up towards the Ravonia exit. There is a stationary vehicle near the Winnie Mandela drive off ramp at four ways, closing a left lane on that N1 North. Heavy coming in from the east, the N12 and R24 routes badly backed up into Galulis. And if you take Marlborough Drive off the N3, you'll be sitting in traffic in a crash scene near Southway in the Marlborough Gardens area. Olifantsfontein, a new road leaving Midrand. Heavy backlogs towards the M1 highway. Pretoria keeping it under control this morning, looking on the light side around your major approaches. Coming on Esky and Pathleli is clear. Stibika Johan Haynes is clear. The run through Hatfield towards Arcadia and Pretoria also looking good as well. Durban side still queuing up on the Higginson Highway. It's a big backlog this morning from Bayview in Chatsworth right through towards the N2 highway. Plenty of traffic on the M4 between Blue Lagoon and Umhlanga both ways north and southbound queuing up through there. And Cape Town, the closure of Baden-Powell Drive at Strandfontein having a big impact. Baden-Powell's closed between Strandfontein and Sunrise Circle or Capricorn Circle on the Muizenberg side due to sand, but it's all the traffic driving towards Muizenberg that's really heavily clogged in Strandfontein area. Baden-Powell, Spine Road, and then the Strandfontein Road as you make your way up through Pelican Park. Very slow. Cape Town's N7 also busy this morning. There's queues at Epping. That's largely due to load shedding, and then just busy and sluggish around the N7 4 Trekker Road junction in the Goodwood area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Brighton and Hove Albion are going all out to brighten their clash against Burnley FC with maximum points.
At Digmer again, that was a masterpiece.
However, Burnley FC will display a sense of urgency to move up from the relegation zone.
Dariola has scored! Down the middle! Burnley lead! Shane Rodriguez!
Who will have a great day on the field of play? The Seagulls or the Clarids? This is the Premier League. Catch the exciting clash between Brighton and Hove Albion and Burnley FC on Saturday, 9 December at 4 p.m. live on S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag we love it here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Rand Water is concerned about the significant increase of water consumption in its areas of supply. The increase in water consumption is putting severe strain on Rand Water's distribution network. To save water, please do not wash your cars with hose pipes. Use buckets. Water your garden with sprinklers between sunset and sunrise. Do not wash your pavements with hose pipes. Use brooms. Repair your leaking taps. Cover your swimming pools to avoid quick evaporation. Shower instead of bathing in a tub.
This message is sponsored by Rand Water in partnership with City of Joburg, City of Ekurhuleni, and City of Tshwane.
SAFM. Prime time all day long.
7 minutes to 8 the time. You know the number 086 000 2032. Water, probably the conversation of the morning. Reoffending also, of course, a big issue, as you know. Lots of people talking about that this morning and just talking about how it is that you deal with it, you know, how you actually manage that situation and how you help people who come out of prisons. Voice notes coming through on that on 0614 104 107.
Hi, Stephen. The reason why our offenders commit the crime again is because when they come from prison, they have a criminal record and it's very difficult for them to get a job anyway. So the best thing is to continue doing crime. So what we can do is to make sure that once you have served your sentence, that criminal record must be erased totally. Thank you.
It's an interesting question. I know people have endless conversations around it. Very difficult.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
I don't know if you belong to a stokvel, and if you do, you may already be planning or have already drawn some money for December and just sort of, you know, using the contributions you've made through the year to your stokvel just to try and manage your December expenses. I think it's been such a difficult time financially. I wonder if people are even, you know, buying presents and things like that, might just try to be paying back debt. Gobile Magongo is a growth specialist at F&B Cash Investments. Gobile, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
When you come to Stockfells, do you find a lot of money coming out of Stockfells at this time of year? People will be using Stockfells for December purchases. Also, next year, education, school uniforms, things like that.
That's correct, Stephen. We know that Stockfells have been encouraging a culture of savings for many years. So we know that when people come together to pool funds, this is a time for them, especially in December, to then go ahead and use those monies to plan ahead, to ensure that the Christmas presents are bought, or to ensure that by the time January comes, they have sufficient that has been stored up. You know, they do save some of that money. They have sufficient stored up in order for them to ensure that they're starting the year right by saving. They're starting the year right by making sure that they have their school supplies, a school uniform. So we're seeing it in two different ways, Stephen. Some are using the contributions to ensure that they have enough spending for the end of the year. Some of them are saving to ensure that then when the beginning of the year comes, they're able to start the year on a good footing.
Is there also a vulnerability? You know, people suddenly have a bit more money, they're spending a bit more money, they've just taken money from the Stockfell. There are all sorts of scam artists and fraudsters out there.
That's true. As we know that a lot of Stockfells save throughout the year, and in December, it is the time where a lot of them actually start distributing the funds. Scammers and criminals are also aware of that throughout the year, all of us are saving, and December is the time where most of us will then go ahead and start spending this money. So it's very wise for anyone who's belonging to a Stockfell to be quite aware on how they're actually distributing the money, first of all, and also where they are spending the money. I would say that a lot of Stockfells have now the option of distributing funds digitally, where back in the days, we know most of the time they had to go into the meetings or had to go into banks to get cash, and then they can start distributing it. But there's a lot of solutions that are out there these days that ensure that they can distribute these funds electronically, first of all, so that even when they are going out to spend their money, it's a matter of just using their cards or using their phone to ensure that they're not holding cash with them. It's also a time, as I've said, that a lot of criminals are aware that Stockfells are sharing money. So if you know that your Stockfell it's the time for your Stockfell to start sharing money at now in December, maybe try not announce those dates. Maybe make sure that only the people in the Stockfell are the ones that are aware that you guys are about to share some money. Even in the spending of the funds, try to be as discreet as possible in the spending of the funds, and not try and share those things on social media or with friends and family.
Kabile, thank you. Kabile Magongo is a growth specialist at F&B Cash Investments.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
Kranti is on the line from Cape Town on the water issue. Kranti, hi, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. How are you?
Yeah, well, go for it.
Good. Stephen, I'm from a place called Whittlesea in the Eastern Cape.
In the Eastern Cape, yeah.
Yeah, which falls under Inokinkishima municipality. In my township, Stephen, we haven't had water since 2006.
Wow.
We are supplied by water trucks, Stephen. We've been in and out of that municipality, given empty promises, and nothing has happened.
That means no one's had a shower in that area since 2006.
On that point, Stephen, we renovated my mom's house. We put showers, geysers, everything. But trust me, since 2009, after we've done that renovation, we haven't taken shower. We've got buckets of water that are standing outside to supply ourselves to cook. Because water is supplied by trucks which are owned by them and is in the tanks.
Sure. Is there any idea that it'll improve, Kranti? I mean, you say promises are made. Does anyone do anything?
I don't think so, Stephen, because whenever I arrive home, I make sure that I drive around and look at the dams that used to supply us when the Bantu dams were still there. I'm saying this with a heavy heart, Stephen, because when I get to those dams are overflowing. We've got 4 dams that used to supply us. They are overflowing, there are rains, but there is no water, there's no running water in our taps, Stephen.
Sure. Kranti, thank you for that. On the line from Whittlesea there. Well, from Whittlesea, but in Cape Town at the moment. Yeah, what a story. And I mean, you build a house in 2009 and you've never actually used the geyser or the shower. And can you imagine that? And I mean, all of the time you would have put in building your mother's house and still just no shower. For older people, it must just be the most awful thing. I mean, there are terrible stories around water in our country at the moment, unfortunately. You're with SAFM leading the conversation. It's you. Let me start that again. You're with SAFM leading the conversation. It's 8 o'clock. Our insurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 38462. Now that's good news.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Top stories this hour. DA councillors fatally shot in KwaZulu-Natal, and political parties welcome to seek blessings from Zulu monarch. Good morning. A DA councillor has been shot and killed in Mpopomeni in Howick in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands. In a statement, the party has confirmed the death of its chief whip in the Umgeni municipality, Councillor Ntlalayenza Ndlovu. The exact circumstances around his death have yet to be confirmed. The party is expected to address the media at the Umgeni Municipality Council chambers today. DA leader in KwaZulu-Natal, Francois Rogers.
It's alleged that 3 gunmen approached his home, and when Councillor Ndlovu opened the door, they shot him at point-blank range and then left. Obviously, our sincere condolences and our heartfelt condolences go out to the Ndlovu family during this really tragic time.
Still in KZN, spokesperson for the AmaZulu King, Prince Africa Zulu, says all political parties are welcome to seek blessings from the Zulu monarch. He made the comments after EFF leader Julius Malema visited AmaZulu King Misizulu KwaZulu-Natal in Ulundi in northern KwaZulu-Natal. The Zulu monarch and Malema deliberated, among other things, on issues of land and political tolerance ahead of next year's general elections. Prince Africa says the king does not have political preferences.
All of the political parties will receive prayers from His Majesty. Not a single one will be excluded from it. His Majesty is praying for the entire political parties. That is why His Majesty's title, formal title, is called Isilo Samabandla Onke. So it means it refers to even Lamabandla of these political parties. So that's a position of the crown, that as a monarch, we understand clearly that in order to strengthen our democracy, we must go all the way out to support everybody and wish them all the luck as they are going to be undertaking the process of competing over the elections and winning votes.
Meanwhile, Malema has refuted claims that his party's policy on land is in conflict with the Ingonyama Trust. The trust controls about 3 million hectares of land in KwaZulu-Natal.
The traditional leaders are the state. So part of how you manage that nationalized land will include the involvement of traditional leaders in the allocation and distribution of such land. So we don't find any contradiction at all. And ours says the state must be the custodian of the land. And why don't you have the problem with Ngonyama Trust owning the land? Because it's exactly what we are saying. The state, the king is the state, and there is no contradiction.
Gauteng Division of the High Court's Judge President, Dustin Mlambo, has rejected allegations of judicial capture. This follows reports of a fake intelligence report allegedly penned by a former intelligence head, Thembisile Majola, on allegations of corruption within the judiciary. Whilst the state security agency distanced itself from the document, it has been shared on social media and has been used as a reference by political heads. Mlambo, who is named in the report, called for the judiciary to be protected. He was speaking at the sidelines of the official opening of the Judges' Conference in Northwest.
The legal profession in its formations was always on hand to protect the judiciary when things like this happen. That kind of intervention by the legal profession in its formations has sort of receded. It's now up to legal NGOs, sometimes who take up the cudgels and defend the judiciary when these unfair allegations are made. I would hope that the legal profession, which feeds into the judiciary, would go back to basics. It would be very untidy for us to engage blow by blow with these things when they could eventually end up in our courts.
One of the accused in the theft at President Cyril Ramaphosa's Palapala farm is this morning expected to apply for bail at the Bela Bela Magistrates Court. 39-year-old Emmanuel David is alleged to be the mastermind behind the theft of over $500,000 at the president's Bela Bela farm. His co-accused Froliana and Ndilinasho Joseph are siblings who are out on bail. Rendani Rapileiswa reports.
Emanuela David faces an additional charge of money laundering in addition to the conspiracy, housebreaking and theft that all three accused face. The state intends on opposing David's bail application. He has been in custody since his arrest on November 5th. The trio is accused of conspiracy to break into Ramaphosa's Parapara farm and stealing foreign currency to the value of about 10 million rand. Florina Joseph worked as a domestic worker at the farm at the time of the theft.
And in the Middle East, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has criticized those he says are trying to pressure Israel's military tactics in Gaza. His remarks comes as the IDF is engaged in the heaviest day of fighting since the start of the war in Gaza. The BBC's Paul Adams has more.
With American officials starting to voice disquiet about Israel's tactics, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had words for those who he said were trying to pressure Israel. The only way to finish the job quickly was to use crushing force against Hamas. That approach is once again killing large numbers of civilians and sending others fleeing for safety. In a meeting earlier with recently released hostages and the families of those still being held by Hamas, the Prime Minister found himself under attack. In a leaked recording of the meeting, one former hostage, who hasn't been identified, accused Mr. Netanyahu of putting politics above the safe return of the remaining 138 hostages.
Recapping our top story this hour, a DA councillor has been shot and killed in Mpopomeni, Howick, in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands. Headlines at the bottom of the hour. For SFM News, I'm Normalizo Mandela.
Normalizo, thank you. Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 38462. For a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out. This festive season, stash away some cash to shop till you drop. Outsurance is so confident that they can save you money on your car insurance premium that you can ask them for 500 rand if they can't. That's a monthly saving on your current premium or 500 rand cash. Claim free and with the same insurer for 3 years, ask for 1,500 rand instead. SMS out to 38462. For a quote. That's out to 38462. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
A very good morning to you in your SFM sports headlines. It's rugby. The Cheetahs, they are to tackle the Zebra Parma in Italy, and that's their Challenge Cup opener. And in soccer news, Lionel Messi has named Time Magazine's Athlete of the Year. We'll bring you all these stories and more just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Not quite sure what's behind this, but Pretoria having a very light Wednesday morning run through the traffic. SQ and Pathlelli open, flowing, unusual. Steepico, Jan Haynes looking good. Hatfield, Boysons, or Hatfield and Brooklyn, I beg your pardon. That's all clear. The Pretoria East region fine. The N1 South moving nicely on the Pretoria section at least. There is a bit of traffic queuing into Joburg this morning between Buccleuch and Marlborough Drive on the Mike 1 South. Marlborough Drive, incidentally, around the Mike 1 highway to change is heavily backed up. The Mike 1 from Gold Reef City through to Smith Street into Braamfontein stays heavy. Durban and the sort of surrounding region, we are seeing lots of crash scenes this morning. Nothing serious enough to really block any roads, but it is wet, it is slippery. It's going to be like that for most of the day, so please have a good think about road safety before you set out. Really, just sort of crashes occurring everywhere, all over and around the Durban area. M13 moving through Pinetown towards Richmond Road, so you're approaching Fields Hill. There's a backlog of traffic. Cape Town, Baden-Powell still closed between Strandfontein and Muizenberg. All the traffic backlogging on the Strandfontein side and quite heavy congestion there. It's just worth noting it's a very busy run on the N1 this morning. Traffic queuing from sort of Belleville area right through to the elevated freeway in the CBD. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
9 after 8, good morning with SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. So much going on today. Water, of course, the big issue. That story around Whittlesea. I mean, you build a house in 2009. The geezers never had water in it. Can you imagine? Just because of the problems there. 086 000 2032. And we see this around the country, you know, and it's really extraordinary and astonishing. And in some cases, it sort of didn't used to be like this. And in some cases, it was always like this, but worse. Well, we'll continue these conversations as we go through the morning, you and I together. The issue around reoffending prisoners, I think, so important as well. I mean, if we could reduce reoffending, we would really make such a big difference to our entire society. And that vigilante justice incident in Diepsloot, for example, is an indication of how frustrated and angry people are with crime. You know, people just dead and murdered in the most horrible way because of their alleged involvement in crime. Well, we'll be talking about the future of the planet. From 8:30, we'll be talking about the COP28 summit, how it all works, why it works in the way that it does, and the role of climate financing. Also, cars and electric cars, our policy on that, that's to come.
Sekhukhune United target a win in their own backyard against Stade Malien FC. Meanwhile, the Malian side refused to travel back home empty-handed. This is the CAF Confederation Cup Group D clash. Catch Sekhukhune United versus Stade Malien FC on Sunday 10 December at 8:30 p.m. live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Going beyond the headline with Aldrin St-Pierre.
But do you think the judgment is implementable?
We definitely think this judgment is implementable. It's all about political will. You see, part of the reason why NUMSA got involved in this application in the first place is we wanted to expose the true agenda of this government. Our experience is that this government is not committed to ending load shedding in the fastest way possible. The fastest way to end load shedding would be to reconnect the power stations which were prematurely shut down when the state erroneously signed deals with international financial institutions to speed up our transition from depending on coal to depending on renewable energy.
This is Aldrin St-Pierre on Beyond the Headline. Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
We'll talk electric cars in a moment. First, to Maluti Apafong we go. Khotso is there. Khotso, hi. The issue of water. Good morning.
Goeiemorgen, meneer Steven. Hoe gaan dit, meneer Steven?
Very well, Khotso. Thank you. Go for it. Oh, no, we've lost that line. All we managed to do was greet each other. All right, Khotso, we'll try and get you back.
Big stories of the day. Hashtag SAFM Sunrise.
Well, many major countries that use cars, so think of the European Union, think of the UK, they're looking at phasing out fossil fuels and making it illegal to buy new cars with internal combustion engines. In other words, you wouldn't be able to buy cars with petrol and diesel engines. We export a lot of cars to those countries. We have a whole policy around it. It's really, really important to our economy. Think of what happens around Brooklyn and Swane. Think of parts of East London and Gqeberha as well. All of that is around the car industry. We stop making those cars, our economy is in much more serious trouble. And if we don't change the cars that we make, well, we'll have no choice. We won't be able to sell the cars that we make. Finally, this week, the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Ibrahim Patel, has explained what kind of policy government is going to be following. We are expecting more incentives and more information from the Finance Minister, Inoch Ngwana, in his February budget. Michael Mabasa is the CEO of the National Association of Automobile Manufacturers of South Africa. Michael, good morning and thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen.
So we know a bit more about the policy. You've waited for this policy for quite a long time. Is it going to help? Is it the right policy for the industry?
It's absolutely a very useful gesture from government because it sends a very clear first signal, Stephen, that the industry has been waiting for the longest time. Because investors, not just only in South Africa, but anywhere else in the world, before they put money into any market, they look at the regulatory environment in that market, stability of the markets, and so on and so forth. So in South Africa, investors have been coming through and they've been asking very, very difficult questions and have not been able to get some of the answers. And I think this white paper that the minister announced this week is a very, very welcoming, early Christmas present for us as a sector, so that we can really be able to reassure all those investors that South Africa is definitely a place where they can be able to come in and put their money.
It's taken a long time, though, hasn't it? I mean, isn't that one of the problems? It's taken a lot longer than maybe it should have.
Absolutely, and obviously, unlike many other policies where the South African government has the luxury to draft its own policy at its own pace, and respond to to those changes as they require. In this case, unfortunately, the trendsetters are not in South Africa. We have obviously other markets that have been on this game much earlier than we have been, and I think the competition is really between governments around the world. If you look at, for example, what's happening in Europe, you look at what's happening in China. Those governments have been absolutely very clear some time ago, and we needed obviously the South African government to also stay the course and obviously respond much earlier. But we are where we are now. We are happy that at least there is now a clearer policy reforms that the minister has announced.
There's a suggestion from the minister that actually we could produce our first electric vehicles to sell, to export, by 2026. I mean, I realize that a large parts of electric cars and petrol and diesel cars are the same. The doors work, I presume, in the same way. But a big part of them is very different. Could we really do it by 2026?
Well, I think it depends, Stephen, also on the different strategies. Because remember, we've got 7 manufacturing OEMs in South Africa today, and each one of them has a different strategy. We do know that many of them are currently calibrating their manufacturing processes. They're looking at their lines. We also do have, OEMs that are already producing new energy vehicles, not necessarily battery electric, but hybrid and also plug-in hybrids. I mean, Toyota in Durban is already producing a Toyota Cross. Mercedes-Benz in East London is producing a plug-in C-Class. BMW 4 months ago announced that they will also be producing an X3 from Roslyn. And then a month ago, also Ford Motor Company also announced in Silverton that they will also be producing a plug-in Ford Ranger as well from their plant. So manufacturers are already gearing themselves. If you look at the employees, many of their employees are going through some very rigorous training, because they also know that there are skills that are currently in the system that are not going to be required as we move into this new technology, and they're now reskilling their employees so that they can be ready for this particular change. So there's already a lot of work that all our OEMs are currently doing in preparation for the evolution. And it could be that some of them would actually take this adoption much earlier than the date that the minister has announced.
There's a lot going on in the car industry around the world, but also here. And within all of this change, companies are going to have to invest money in changing what they make. You talk about the training, that's an investment that costs the companies money. There was that comment by Volkswagen, I forget the person's name now, but the senior executive who sort of said they're battling a bit in South Africa. I think we're one of their biggest, and we have been one of their biggest branches for a very long time outside Germany. Are you worried that actually for a large number for some of the car companies, that South Africa may just not be viable if you look at load shedding and Transnet?
Well, look, I think the comments that Thomas Schaefer made earlier in the month are commonly shared views across the sector. It's not a unitary point that VWSA was making. I think many companies are equally frustrated that some of the challenges that they have currently in the market, unfortunately, they don't have similar challenges elsewhere around the world. Because remember, Stephen, it takes us about 8 days, as a sector, to be able to bring vehicles from Europe into South Africa, and another 8 days to take them back, because 64% of what we're producing in South Africa goes out of the country and they go into different markets, particularly Europe. You have markets now like Morocco, you've got Egypt, you've got Nigeria. In Africa, many of whom who have already raised their hands and they're saying, we also want the pie of the automotive industry, and we want to play in that market. It takes Morocco only 4 hours to be able to move their vehicles across the channel. And then obviously that 8 days that I spoke about, when they get to South Africa, they then also have additional challenges in Transnet itself to be able to process those vehicles, to be offloaded from all those ships that are coming through and so on. So the logistics, space and the challenges that we have within Transnet are absolutely a very, very massive challenge. And also in terms of production, many of our lines are also interrupted, momentarily by load shedding and so on. And that obviously has, those very, very specific challenges that these investors are currently looking at. And they're saying, is it still attractive for us to stay in South Africa? But many of them have actually made that commitment. And we are now working very closely with government so that we can try and see how best we can support in resolving these imminent challenges that we're currently having.
Mikhail Mabasa, thank you, CEO of the National Association of Automobile Manufacturers of South Africa.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Mkhize on the line from Plettenberg Bay. Mkhize, hi. The issue of re-offenders. Go for it.
Yes, Stephen. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go for it.
Yes, I was just saying there's a... Okay, sorry, I've just got an echo here. I was just saying there's a YouTube channel which I've been watching in the past year. It's called the Agenda Network. So what they've done is that they interview ex-offenders, and then essentially these ex-offenders, they tell their story, how they ended up in prison, the conditions in prison, and what they've done since they've come out of prison to try and reintegrate into society. And that's actually taught me a great deal about these ex-offenders, and it's really humanized their story. And I think if a lot of us were to see this channel, it would actually allow us maybe to put a human face to these guys and not to judge them so much.
It's
so,
called what was it called? The Agenda. What's it called, Mkhize? The Agenda Channel.
Agenda Network.
Agenda Network. All right, thank you. Yeah. All right, Mkhize, thank you from Plettenberg Bay. And Mkhize, you make an important point about humanizing offenders. Everyone there has their own story, their own mother, their own father, their own siblings, their own story of how they got there and what happened. Such a good point. Mkhize, thank you from Plettenberg Bay.
Gautrain is for the legends who make moves to save and pay from as little as 35 Rand from Hatfield to Centurion. Is for Ikoko, who steady chill on neutral on a downhill just to save fuel. So when it comes to travel, make moves that save and pay from as little as 35 Rand from Hatfield to Centurion Station. Gautrain, for people on the move.
Various African outfits will display a great brand of cricket this festive season. Kenya, Ghana and Cameroon will play their hearts out in the East-West qualifier of the BNP Group Africa Cup T20 2023. They will all endeavour to clinch one of 4 remaining spots. This is the journey to the finals of the BNP Group Africa Cup T20 2023. Witness the thrilling action from 5 to 10 December, live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies invites interested individuals and stakeholders to submit written comments on their SABC bill. The bill seeks to repeal the Broadcasting Act of 1999 to regulate the continued existence of the SABC, to provide its governance, to amend the ICASA Act of 2000 and the Electronic Communications Act of 2005. For more information, contact the Portfolio Committee of Communications and Digital Technologies by emailing sabcbill@parliament.gov.za, directed to Hanjiera Sali. Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
24 minutes after 8 the time. Good morning. Well, new reports suggesting that in fact the rise in global temperatures and climate change could lead to new epidemics and actually make it easier for epidemics to move around the world. Professor Tulio de Oliveira is the director of the Center for Epidemic Response and Innovation at the University of Stellenbosch. Professor de Oliveira, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Hey, good morning, and good morning to all your listeners.
How does global change affect the way epidemics or diseases move around the world?
Okay, so we just finished. To be honest, I just arrived last night in South Africa, come from the COP28 in Dubai. Yeah, and one thing that's very clear, and that is the first COP that happened, is that diseases are intertwined with climate change. Just to get idea, yeah, during the COP28, yeah, we led a group of over 100 scientists from all the top organizations in the world that wrote a report. And this report, which was adopted at COP28, it showed clearly that close to 60%, this means 6 in 10 of the non-pathogens are being amplified by climate change. And that is potentially where the next pandemic will come.
Are there particular diseases or particular pathogens we need to look out for? I mean, there are some diseases that will absolutely spread more easily in hotter temperatures.
Yes, it is. It is both in hotter and colder temperature. Yes. So for example, I think that's quite clear what's happening in South Africa in the beginning of the year on the cholera epidemic. To be honest, was a really the worst deadly cholera epidemic that happened in Southern Africa, especially Malawi, Mozambique. It's happening now at Zimbabwe. Yeah. So that's one that's easily spread when you have floods. Yeah. Another one that's easily spread when the temperatures increase, yeah, it's a whole lot of different viruses. We have more than 20 viruses in this category that we call arboviruses. That's the technical term by virus that are transmitted by mosquitoes, yeah. So we are seeing bigger outbreaks of dengue and chikungunya. The one that we worry the most that can have a pandemic potential is Rift Valley fever because it has a very high case fatality rate. And we are seeing more common outbreaks in East Africa. And then 2022 was a big alert of a potentially large outbreak in South Africa, which did not happen, but that's normally associated with a higher temperature, especially in the middle of the country. And that's what we're seeing this week in the Free State, in Gauteng. We are seeing really higher temperatures.
There's also the impacts of certain events. So we're likely to have more floods as a result of climate change, and that brings its own problems with disease.
Yes, and even until now, you remember the big floods in Durban, yeah, last year. Until today, the both the river and the sea, it is contaminated with E. coli, yeah, and that's the same for the after floods with cholera, but also with pathogens that will breed in the water, yeah, especially bacteria. Or also after floods, you have a bigger proliferation of mosquitoes and ticks. Unfortunately, yeah, the climate change is happening, yeah, and more epidemics are coming due to that.
Thank you very much indeed. Professor Tulio de Oliveira is the director of the Center for Epidemic Response and Innovation at the University of Stellenbosch. 3:07 after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. The Cheetahs are in Italy.
Yes, they have an upcoming match. They'll take on the Zebra Parma. Looking forward to it. 9th of December, 3 p.m. is that kickoff. Their head coach, Javis Faria, eyeing a strong run in this competition known as the Challenge Cup. Now, they made their European debut as an invitational team in 2022-2023. They've been once again invited to take part in the competition, and the Free Staters will be hosting the Sharks in Bloemfontein. That's the following Sunday on the 17th of December. Meanwhile, Springbok Sevens prop Christy Grobelaar, he's been ruled out of the HSBC Sevens Cape Town, and he sustained an ankle injury picking it up at last weekend's Emirates Dubai Sevens, which was won by the Blitzboks for a 5th consecutive and 11th time overall. He underwent a scan in Cape Town after the team arrived back from Dubai, which revealed he's unfit to play come Saturday or Sunday. Soccer news, Manchester City boss Pep Guardiola confident his side will win the Premier League if they maintain the levels reached in recent draws against Tottenham and Liverpool. Now, despite City's dip in form, Guardiola did not seem worried. This is ahead of the club's trip to Aston Villa tonight. When asked about his side's win percentage being lower without Rodri, who is suspended for the game, Guardiola had this to say.
Well, normally it's higher because we want to travel and play a lot of games.
So that is the reason why. So we don't deny how important it is, but it's not there. They suspend it like Jack. So we will find the best solution to compete against Aston Villa.
Moving to Formula One, China, Miami, Austria, Austin, Sao Paulo and Qatar are the 6 Grand Prix chosen to host sprint events during the 2024 Formula One season. A plan to move qualifying for the sprint and hold the shorter race on Sunday before Grand Prix qualifying has been effectively agreed. More radical changes, such as reversing the sprint grid, are also being considered. These will be discussed at a meeting of the F1 Commission, which comprises F1 governing body, the FIA, and all 10 teams. It will take place in January next year. That's a wrap of your Sport on Sunrise. We'll bring you more sport on SAFM around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. COP28, does it matter? That's next. You with SAFM leading the conversation, 8:30.
And in the headlines, a DA councillor has been shot and killed in Mpopomeni in Harwich in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands. In a statement, the party confirmed the death of its chief whip in the Umgeni municipality, Councillor Ntlalayenza Ndlovu. The party is expected to brief the media at the Umgeni Municipality Council chambers today. In other news, the organization Undoing Tax Abuse, OUTA, has warned of a looming student accommodation crisis in the next academic year due to what it calls NSFAS's slow pace of accrediting student accommodation. The organization released its investigation report on what it says is yet another alleged tender irregularity at NSFAS. And Eskom has launched investigations following corruption allegations against its employees in Soweto. The power utility says it has learned through social media that its employees are allegedly colluding with a ward councillor in Dobsonville to switch off and damage electricity infrastructure and later demand that customers contribute money towards the repairs. More details on these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. If you're driving Pretoria, you might be wondering where everybody is this morning. We're wondering the same thing. Pretoria, 20 roads open and clear. Pretoria East looking good. The N1 is flowing. Eskia and Perth Valley, always a problem in the morning. Absolutely no traffic through there. And even despite some load shedding around Hatfield and Brooklyn, traffic getting along very nicely. Joburg, breakdown on the N3 North at Modderfontein. Traffic coming out through Galuli stays heavy as a result of that. Durban, it's absolutely bucketing down. And the rain, I believe, is with us all day today. What we are seeing on Durban roads is a lot of crashes, a lot of bumps and shunts. Thankfully, nothing too serious, but a real inconvenience as you have to deal with insurance and deal with panel beaters and what have you. So obviously you lose the use of your car for a while as well if you're involved in that sort of stuff. So take it nice and easy, please. The greater Durban region, inland and right through KZN. Lots of rain, lots of unfortunate crash scenes that we are witnessing today. But that rain really is teeming down at the moment. M4 from Blue Lagoon up towards Virginia Airport on your way to Umhlanga stays busy. Cape Town, the closure of Baden Powell still in place between Strandfontein and Musen, but there's a lot of traffic backlogging on the Strandfontein side of that particular closure. And if you're on the N1 into Cape Town, it's reasonably busy today from sort of Plattercliff Hill territory all the way to the elevated freeway. It means Kuberg Road and Marine Drive coming through from the Parton Island side, backlogging to get in or through that N1. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
A loving partner shouldn't take away your choices. Your choice of clothes, your choice to wear makeup and cut your hair. A loving partner shouldn't choose your friends or choose how you spend your time. A loving partner shouldn't control who you speak to. If your partner is controlling your choices, it's abuse. Get help now. Dial Tears *134 *7355# or visit tears.co.za. An SABC supported initiative.
Polokwane City want to test if Kaizer Chiefs can handle the Limpopo heat. Their plan is to get a comfortable position in the top half. But the Kosi Nation is in a good mood to collect maximum points away from home. Rise and Shine versus Rise Kosi Rise. This is the DSTV Premiership. Polokwane City versus Kaizer Chiefs on Saturday, 9 December at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Mediate Mediated conversation on SAFM.
26 minutes now to 9 the time. Time for your mediated conversation this Wednesday morning. As you know, the COP28 Climate Summit is currently underway in Dubai. Leaders from around the world and from most of the world's countries are trying to find ways to agree on methods to end climate change. Many of these issues are conversations you've heard many times. It's about moving away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy. But also now conversations around whether the global north should help the global south. It's the global north, those countries that have done more to change the climate than poorer countries, and yet it is poorer countries which often have to pay the cost. Within all of this are debates around climate financing. In other words, how to use the power of money to change the way we live to save the climate. So then, could the world change after the summit? Will we actually find that nothing really changes, and how does climate finance work? First this morning, the role of COP, how it works and why has it become such a big event. Dr. Roland Ngam is the project manager for climate justice at the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. Then the role of climate finance. Sasha Cook is the head of sustainable finance at Standard Bank. And finally, what can we hope for from COP, and should we prepare for disappointment? Alex Linferner is a climate justice campaigner and secretary of the Climate Justice Coalition. We start then with Dr. Roland Ngam, the project manager for climate justice at the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. Dr. Ngam, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to all the listeners.
As I understand it, the actual name of COP is the Conference of the Parties. What is COP? How did the event get to be so big over the last sort of 20 years?
Yes, Stephen, the COP is the Conference of the Parties, and the parties really are the signatories to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. You know, at the Rio conference, the world realized that we were killing the planet, literally. And that is why the processes were signed with Bonn as the headquarters and Berlin as the first COP. And we have moved all the way down to Dubai this year. And so you have the parties, that is mostly governments, who do the negotiations. And on the side, the president of the COP organizes a venue for civil society to gather and to do protest actions, the media, etc. But over the years, we have seen a slow dilution of the process, in the sense that there is a hard separation between civil society and governments. And at the same time, we have the kind of gridlock that happens in all United Nations processes, if I can put it that way.
The fact that there's 70,000 people, I read, at the event this year, I mean, do they all need to be there?
Stephen, there is clearly something happening here. We have to understand that the 70,000 people are not necessarily delegates. So the parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change really will be a small number. That figure really blows up when you start adding, for example, people who come to the expos and so on. This year, something very specific is happening. In the build-up to COP28, we had ministers of energy, oil and gas, etc., meeting in several different venues. And the reason for that is because Sultan Al Jaber, the president of COP28, has deliberately tried to, using American football terms, to flood the zone. That is, he wants to drown out really the agenda of 1.5 degrees by bringing in oil and gas people, fossil fuel people, really to try and sell this idea that green energy and green gas are possible, things like that.
I was going to say, if you really want to stop this process, just have more people involved in it. That's what's happened here. How then did this group of people get to be the organizers? How did that happen?
Well, because once again, Stephen, this is really the kind of gridlock that I am explaining at a UN level. The fact that all countries really have the same rights in principle. And so countries will vote for each other irrespective of the kind of domestic politics that they have, whether these politics are progressive or not. You also have, for example, Russia, which has already vetoed Europe for COP29. And so UN processes really sometimes are very frustrating, very slow, and really not progressive at all. And also, just quickly as well, you will see that there is this dilution of sustainable development, sustainable growth, sustainable finance, and all of that. A lot of greenwashing happening from major polluters, from banks that sponsor all these dirty industries and so on. And all this greenwashing means that emissions have gone up, not down, since COP processes started.
When countries come to important agreements at COP, and there have been various important agreements, there might be this time, there may not. So say, for example, they'll reduce emissions by a particular amount. Do they stick to those commitments? Is there any way to make sure that they stick to the commitments they make at COP?
There are no binding agreements really to the treaties that are signed. And so that is why you have, for example, England deciding to postpone the transition from internal combustion engines, for example. That is why you have China, which has set up more than 200 gigawatts of coal energy generation capacity since 2019. That is why since the Paris COP, the commitment to invest $100 billion in developing countries' adaptation and mitigation has not materialized. We hit 20 billion only in 2022. And this, once again, is the problem that we have at UN level. To really make any significant impact, we all know that we need to cut emissions anywhere to the order of 45-50%. That is not happening now. And with the hard turn right of politics in countries like Germany and France, USA, etc., it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Dr. Rendon Gum, thank you. Project Manager for Climate Justice at the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. 19 minutes to 9. You're with SAFM. Your mediated conversation today is around the COP28 conference. Sasha Cook is the Head of Sustainable Finance at Standard Bank. She's actually at the conference. Sasha, good morning. I think we might have dragged you out of something. I know you weren't able to hear Dr. Ngum. Good morning, and thank you for your time this morning. Sasha Cook.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you. As I understand climate finance, it's about providing loans to help companies and countries move away from using fossil fuels and towards using renewable methods. How important is the role climate finance is now playing in dealing with climate change?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, I think climate finance is probably one of the key tools that really underpins a lot of the efforts in terms of
Right, we seem to
dealing with both mitigating and adapting to the impacts of climate change. So, when we talk about finance, maybe to sort of, I suppose, explain it in a way that's digestible, there's two key aspects to climate finance. The first aspect deals with climate mitigation, and you correctly point out examples of moving away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. So climate mitigation refers to finance directed to projects that actually reduce or avoid emissions. So renewable energy, projects that conserve energy or water, electric vehicles are all good examples. The second pillar of climate finance, which is probably slightly less well understood, is actually finance directed towards climate adaptation. And that really refers to projects that finance communities, cities' ability to adapt to or become more resilient to the impacts of climate change. So here you're talking about examples like relocating buildings or other infrastructure to higher ground where there might be areas impacted by rising sea levels. You might be talking about resilient agriculture in terms of drought-resistant seeds or heat-resistant crops. So I think it's quite important to make sure that we're talking about both climate mitigation and climate adaptation when we reference climate finance.
Are you finding the role for this is growing? Is there more and more demand for this kind of financing?
Undoubtedly, yes. And it's actually been quite interesting, Stephen, being here at COP and hearing some of the phrases again and again. And there's this phrase that I've heard now multiple times where there's a reference to billions being committed or flowing, but trillions being needed. So, you really are talking about the current financing flows directed towards climate mitigation and adaptation being, a percentage, a fraction of what's actually required, particularly in the instance of developing countries.
Is there actually enough money, enough capital to finance what needs to happen? You talk about billions, but do the trillions actually exist? Do the banks and the industries and the financing around the world actually have the ability to finance this then? Does the money exist?
So it's a good question. I mean, I'm not sure there's a simple answer to that. I think what we need to be doing is scaling up or crowding in the capital. If you look at, I suppose, if you look at some of the key parties that are going to play a role here, you've got governments, you've got multilateral development banks, development finance institutions, and then you've got the private sector. And there is a need for all of these parties to really come together to mobilize this capital. And again, one of the buzzwords or phrases that has been referenced here at COP28 in Dubai this year has been this concept of blended finance. So here we are talking about bringing together in innovative structures financiers with slightly different risk appetites who, you might be able to bring in a development finance institution to take certain risks that commercial banks or other institutions would not be prepared to take. And by so doing, you actually enable the crowding in of additional capital that would not have otherwise mobilized. So there is this concept that has been discussed at length at COP this year around, the simple answer is no. The multilateral development banks and DFIs alone do not have the scale to address the financing needs. So it's going to have to be a scaling up of what's being done by those institutions and organizations, together with a significant crowding in of capital from the private sector.
Are the terms of the deals different from other loans? So when I think of climate finance, imagine being a business, for example, I'm going to borrow money to build a new factory. Would there be any difference between the terms of that deal, the money I borrowed to build a new factory, or the loan that I would get because I now want to install solar panels because I want to stop using coal? So are the deals very different?
That's a very interesting question, actually, a very relevant one. So, Stephen, there are principles that exist that govern sustainable finance instruments, and this is both in the loan and capital markets, because you can be talking.
All right, we seem to have lost Sasha Cook there, unfortunately. To try and just continue that conversation, was just asking if the terms are different. As I say, she is in the UAE at the moment. She is actually at the COP28 conference, and this is one of the problems that we've had, is trying to just understand from her what exactly is happening. I think we will try and get her back and see if we're able to just continue that conversation. I thought part of the conversation that was important was to understand climate finance, which is something that everyone talks about. You hear it and see it in adverts all the time, but to actually understand it is something different. So just in a way, unfortunately, this was perhaps the key question. Are the loans any different? Are the terms of the loans any different? Let's see if we're able to get her back. Otherwise, we'll continue the conversations as well. We'll also, in a moment, speak to Dr. Alex Lanferner about this issue. Here, of course, one of the people very much involved in what's been happening around COP28 and around climate generally. So, this is some of the things that we're going to be talking about for now. So, that conversation will continue with SAFM 12 minutes to 9.
Yeah, I'm sure Nelly has newfound respect for me. I had to sort her out, hey? Next time she keeps quiet while I'm talking to her, she'll think twice, I tell you.
Coach. And that'll be a perfect example to your son on how to treat a woman.
Hey, man, what does my son have to do with this now?
Man, Coach, you tell me, man. Look how you turned out and think deep. Pella, the cycle could end with you. Let us uplift the boy child and raise real men for a gender violence-free tomorrow. A message brought to you by Love Life. This is an SABC-supported initiative.
Various African outfits will display a great brand of cricket this festive season. Kenya, Ghana and Cameroon will play their hearts out in the East-West qualifier of the BNP Group Africa Cup T20 2023. They will all endeavor to clinch one of 4 remaining spots. This is the journey to the finals of the BNP Group Africa Cup T20 2023. Witness the thrilling action from 5 to 10 December, live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Going beyond the headline with Aldrin St-Pierre.
But do you think the judgment is implementable?
We definitely think this judgment is implementable. It's all about political will. You see, part of the reason why NUMSA got involved in this application in the first place is we wanted to expose the true agenda of this government. Our experience is that this government is not committed to ending load shedding in the fastest way possible. The fastest way to end load shedding would be to reconnect the power stations which were prematurely shut down when the state erroneously signed deals with international financial institutions to speed up our transition from depending on coal to depending on renewable energy.
This is Aldrin St-Pierre on Beyond the Headline. SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good news from the Edenvale side of Joburg. The breakdown of Modderfontein Road, N3 North, that's being cleared away, and that traffic that was jamming through Galulis is moving nicely. Republic Road out to William Mandela is quite heavy if you're leaving the Randburg area towards Sandton. Also a big queue of traffic coming through from Lone Hill. This is on the main road, all the way down through Vickop and then right down to Bryanston Drive. William Mandela out of Four-Way is quite heavy as well, queuing up from around about Vickop and down through Montecasino over the M1 highway and down to Sloane Street. Looks like some sort of impact of some earlier load shedding perhaps in the top end of Bryanston. Over in Durban, the rain has been heavy this morning and there's been a lot of crashes. Please take it nice and easy in the traffic. It can be just a little bump or a shunt, but that'll be enough to be an inconvenience. So heavy rain, poor weather conditions, poor driving conditions. So make sure you've got plenty of time to get through and get through safely at lower speeds. A collision on the N2 South in the rain between Gateway and Kwamashu. So another morning of backed up traffic coming south into Durban on that route. Cape Town today, Baden-Powell Drive closure between Strandfontein and Muizenberg still with us. The pressure really is on the Strandfontein side. Routes like Spine Road, Baden-Powell into the closure and Strandfontein Road are all really heavy with that traffic diverting. The N1 into town stays busy towards the elevated freeway, and then behind that it's just a bit of an extended wait to get through on the Kuberg Road and Marine Drive. Both of those options queuing to get into the N1 congestion. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
8 minutes to 9. All right, let's just continue the mediated conversation now. Let's very quickly finish the conversation with Sasha Cook, the head of sustainable finance at Standard Bank at COP at the moment. Sasha, good morning again. Sorry about that. The question I'd asked was whether when you borrow money, when you get climate financing because you're a company and you want to install solar panels, if the terms of that are any different to, say, a business that's simply borrowing money to build a new factory.
Yes. Stephen, sorry about losing connection there. So there are some differences. There can be some concessional terms available, and that could be through the use of blended finance instruments, as I had previously mentioned, where you actually bring in some concessional pools of funding, potentially grant funding or other forms of funding that lowers the overall cost of funding. We have also seen where instruments are structured as green that there's an increase in appetite or liquidity available in the market to invest in these instruments, which again may actually translate to a slightly tighter pricing on the instrument. I would say the other key factors that there are principles that govern these instruments, and under the green loan and green bond principles, there is actually a requirement to report on the ongoing impact of the projects that are being invested in. And that for me is quite a key difference, because not only are you dispersing the funds and doing some upfront due diligence around how the proceeds will be used, but there's actually a requirement on an annual basis to report on the impact of how the funds have been used.
Right, I'm with you now. Sasha Cook, thank you very much indeed. Head of Sustainable Finance at Standard Bank. We are going to end it there. I realise that we are having some technical difficulties and you are at the COP28 conference, which may be part of it. So thank you for that. We continue your mediated conversation now with Dr. Alex Linferner, Climate Justice Campaigner and Secretary of the Climate Justice Coalition. Dr. Linferner, good morning to you and thank you for your time.
Good morning to your listeners.
It would seem to me that one of the best ways to make to stop climate change is to basically harness the economics of the transition. Does climate financing play a big role in that? Is everything we're seeing now going to lead to a real change in how the world works and generates energy?
Yeah, I think you're right. We really need to be moving money into renewable energy and technologies that support it, like storage. And so we need to be asking big questions about those who hold the finance. And I think even your previous guest, Standard Bank, invests still a lot in fossil fuels. And so we're at a point where the science says we need to be redirecting funds into renewable energy only, and we can't continue to ramp up fossil fuels. Otherwise, we'll push past this really vital 1.5 degrees Celsius target. So there's lots of money around, and particularly when we think about the money that's held by wealthy and corporations, a lot of that's going to fossil fuels still. So if we redirected those funds to clean energy, we would go a really long way. And so there needs to be big questions asked of those that hold the funding, why they're still funding new fossil fuels. Even the chair of, the COP28, Sultan Al-Jaber, who's also head of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, they're planning on investing in a massive expansion of oil and gas, far out of line of what's needed on climate change. So why aren't those funds that are going to fund that expansion instead going to climate action? I think there's a lot of contradiction in that space that need to be called out.
There's a lot going on at COP, and I just want to sort of move away from COP for a minute to two of the bigger factors that I think might determine what happens next. You're the expert on this, Dr. Lon Ferner, but these are two things that I identified. There are two global dynamics. The one is China, where they seem to be moving towards renewables very quickly from what I can see. And in fact, more quickly than anyone really thought possible. India is doing the same. The other is the United States, and what happens if Donald Trump wins another term as the US president. Are those two important factors to watch with regard to the climate?
Definitely, and I think you're right. China is moving at a speed and scale that very few understand. It is a massive amount of renewable energy that they're investing. If you add EU and the United States and the UK all together, they still don't, add up to how much China is investing in renewable energy. Of course, at the same time, they've been investing quite heavily in coal, and so there's a big question of how much that coal will be utilized. But, recent forecasts suggest that China's emissions are likely to peak next year and start structural decline. So that is a massive, massive shift that's happening. In America, under the Biden administration, they passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which, has been one of the biggest investments in renewable energy and clean technologies in American history. Arguably it's not quite enough, but it's quite an important starting point. And if the Trump, administration comes back into power, they've been quite clear that they want to dismantle that progress. And so, this is, I think, where we see where right-wing governments are often very much in bed with fossil fuel lobbies who try to bring them into power in order to dismantle and roll back progress on climate change. And so I think this is where climate activists trying to work their hardest to avoid the election of leaders like that who roll back progress. We've seen the same thing in the UK, where the Conservative Party came into power and started pushing forward new fossil fuel projects and rolling back progress. And so really the political terrain is a key area where we need to fight at if we want to hold progress and push it forward.
Could it also be if the United States, if Trump doesn't win, or if the United States does sort of do what China has done, and if China is able to benefit from it economically, you would like to think the US would follow that, so would India and other countries, so would we, I suppose, that actually what becomes the most important thing isn't COP. What becomes the most important thing is following the lead of someone who is already reaping the benefits of renewable power. I realize that's a contested statement or a contestable statement. But in fact, China's lead could become the most important factor in reducing climate change. People would simply follow.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, is if you actually look at the economics, a big reason why China is investing in renewable energy is it's the most affordable, most reliable way of delivering energy. And so what we see at the global stage is, in fact, a bit of an economic arms race for countries to invest in renewable energy so that they can have an economic advantage in the 21st century, which the International Energy Agency says is the era of clean industrialization. Now, the reason a lot of the times why we don't move forward is because we have vested interest and lobbies within government that are holding us back. So we can think about back home in South Africa. The ANC, through its investment arms, is invested in companies like Shell, an oil and gas company, or Seriti, a coal mining company. And so they would much prefer that we stay locked into, more expensive and polluting fossil fuel contracts so that they can benefit significantly from them. So I think a lot of the story comes down to conflict of interest and corruption holding us back from a future that's not only cleaner but also more economically prosperous.
Dr. Alex Linfena, thank you. Climate Justice Campaigner and Secretary of the Climate Justice Coalition. My thanks also today to Sasha Cook, the Head of Sustainable Finance at Standard Bank. And starting us off today, Dr. Ronan Gums, the Project Manager for Climate Justice at the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. I hope that there's a little bit of clarity around the role of COP and then, of course, the big dynamics that are playing out around the world that may reduce climate change in the longer term, particularly around climate financing. I think there's going to be a lot more discussions and things that we need to look at there. Well, I think it's going to be a busy news day today. There's the NHI bill going through Parliament today. Don't forget, between 10 and 11, Kathy will be speaking to Senzo Mchunu, the Minister of Water Affairs, an important conversation after the release of those reports. From Mdu, Stanza Zoma, myself, look after yourself. You're with SFM, leading the conversation. It's 9 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Top stories this hour. Half of South Africa's drinking water is unsafe, and new corruption allegations against Eskom employees. Good morning. Nearly half of South Africa's drinking water is unsafe. This was revealed when Water and Sanitation's Minister Senzo Mchunu released the Blue and No Drop Water report. That report has also revealed the regression and the decline in the performance of many municipal drinking water systems since 2014. Julius Kleinhans from WaterCan, a network of activists, which is an initiative of Outer, says there are no consequences in municipalities for failing to supply communities with clean quality water, which is a basic human right.
We don't see proper management of our water resources and infrastructure. Municipalities are not supplying proper services. However, we see that rates and taxes go up every year. So we're not getting quality service, and there's no consequence management. We see them polluting rivers, and we see that they're supplying substandard water to people, but no one is held to account.
A DA councillor has been shot and killed in Mpopomeni in Howick in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands. In a statement, the party has confirmed the death of its chief whip in the Umgeni municipality, Councillor Ntlalayenza Ndlovu. The exact circumstances around his death have not yet been confirmed. The party is expected to address the media at the Umgeni municipality council chambers today. DA leader in KwaZulu-Natal, Francois Rogers.
It's alleged that 3 gunmen approached his home, and when Councillor Ndlovu opened the door, they shot him at point-blank range and then left. Obviously, our sincere condolences and our heartfelt condolences go out to the Ndlovu family during this really tragic time.
5 suspects arrested in connection with the murder of 7 people who were tortured and set alight in Diepsloot, north of Johannesburg, over the weekend, are expected to appear in the Randburg Magistrates Court today. Police say the suspects were arrested on Monday after one of them was identified by an eyewitness, and he later led police to 4 more suspects. The Community Safety Portfolio Committee in the Gauteng Legislature has called on national and provincial governments to urgently address the high levels of crime in Diepsloot. Community Chairperson Bandile Masuku says the community's concerns are legitimate.
The committee has noted efforts by the community through various means of demonstration and protest that has not yielded any desired outcomes from the police to decisively intervene and bring the end to the scourge of crime experienced by the residents of Diepsloot. The committee is of the view that the concerns and frustration of the community of Diepsloot and of Gauteng citizens in general are genuine and requires a concerted effort.
The organization Doing Tax Abuse Outer has warned of a looming student accommodation crisis in the next academic year. This, it says, is due to the NSFAS's slow pace of accrediting student accommodation. OUTA says out of the 497,000 beds, NSFAS has only managed to accredit 25,000 beds. Accommodation providers must register their beds with the NSFAS, which the scheme inspects for compliance in line with minimum standards and norms as set out by the Department of Higher Education. OUTA released its investigation report of what it says is yet another alleged tender irregularity at NSFAS. OUTA's Rudy Heineke says the slow pace of accreditation will lead to thousands of students having no accommodation. Heineke says they have submitted their findings to the SIU.
The majority of the 39 service providers